Jeopardy.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there short and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 12 o'clock on Friday, the 24th of January. I'm Tom Harwood.
And I'm Emily Carver.
It's been described as the worst storm of the century. Storm Aowyn battles Britain, with hurricane-force winds expected to reach up to 100 miles an hour in some parts of the country. We have reporters everywhere.
Northern Ireland saw the worst of the storm in the early hours of the morning. By 9 o'clock, those gusts had gone, but the clean-up operation and damage control now begins.
Well, Scotland is only a couple of hours into its red weather warning, but already 2,500 homes across Scotland without power, and damage like this community centre behind me already a part of the story of this storm.
OK, and a life behind bars for the Southport killer. Axel Ridicabana will likely die in prison after he received a 52-year sentence for the murder of 3 little girls. But a question to you. Are you satisfied we know enough about his motivation?
Elsewhere, is faith in the high street dying? Supermarket giant Sainsbury's announces over 3,000 job cuts, while Primark's owners have a reported rare plunge in retail sales during this crucial Christmas quarter.
And over in the States, Donald Trump has ordered officials to make plans to declassify documents related to 3 of the most consequential assassinations in US history: the killings of JF Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy, and Martin Luther King Jr. It was a very difficult day yesterday for the country, I think, and also people in all different countries around the world were watching that sentencing, waiting to find out what would happen to the Southport killer. But I do wonder whether we understand enough, whether we've been told enough, whether it's been investigated even enough, as to why this monster decided to target that particular Taylor Swift workshop and why he particularly went after little girls as opposed to boys. I think that is crucial information that we deserve to know.
We heard from the judge that he believed Ridicabana attacks the most vulnerable in society, those who would be the easiest target to some extent. And I think that is part of the story here. But there are difficult questions to ask about the obsession that Ridicabana clearly had with racial conflict, with genocide, and with some of the most violent assassinations in history. There are some questions to be asked here about a wider motivation and whether this was indeed motivated not just for lust for violence, but out of hate.
Yeah, because just being told that he was obsessed with violence, OK, yes, that is a motivation to be violent, but the specific targeting of this dance class, have we got to the bottom of that. Let us know your thoughts. gbnews.com/your say. But it's your headlines with Tatiana.
Emily, thank you very much and good afternoon. The top stories. Millions of people have been urged to stay at home as 100-mile-per-hour winds pose a danger to life and cause travel disruption across the UK. Schools, rail services and hospitals are all set to be affected today when Storm Aowyn slams the country. Forecasters have flagged a rare threat to life red weather warning. Over 4 million people across Northern Ireland and Scotland received emergency alerts from the Met Office last night with guidance on how to stay safe. More than 715,000 homes, farms and businesses are without power across the Republic of Ireland today. A wind speed of 114 miles per hour brought by the storm has been recorded in Ireland, the fastest since records began. Local authorities have warned commuters to avoid travel at all costs. The Southport child killer will likely die behind bars after murdering 3 little girls at a dance class, but his 52-year sentence has sparked calls for law changes. Axel Rudakabana received one of the highest minimum custody terms on record for the attack in Southport in July last year, when he was 17 years old. Alice de Silva Aguirre, B.B. King and Elsie Dot Stankham were killed, and harrowing details of the attack were heard in court yesterday. However, Southport's Labour MP Patrick Hurley said the sentence was not severe enough, and he asked the Attorney-General to review it as unduly lenient. Due to Rudakabana's age at the time of the attack, he cannot legally receive a whole-life order. The head of the UK's largest police force has welcomed a review of contempt of court laws and said it would be great if more information in cases could be shared at an earlier stage. Defence Secretary John Healey told GB News Rudakabana did not get a whole-life sentence because international law has prevented it.
The technicality of the whole-life sentences, I think it's important to know that the last government did reduce it to 18 in line with international law after the Manchester Arena bombings, and that still stands. There are a range of other aspects of law, of agencies who have failed in this case to step in. They knew about this man's extreme violence, but they failed to take any steps that might have prevented it. And there may be changes also in the programmes that are designed to deal with this sort of extremism. That's what the inquiry, now the court case has finished, which was launched this week, will do.
Wigan Council has voted for a national inquiry into the grooming gang scandal, breaking with the Labour government's position. The local authority, which is Labour-led, unanimously voted through a motion requesting that a full national inquiry is undertaken. That motion said the abuse had destroyed the lives of tens of thousands of teenage girls, adding that an inquiry would provide justice for the young girls who've suffered and identify preventative measures moving forward. In other news, Hamas is expected to hand over to Israel the names of 4 hostages to be released tomorrow under the Gaza ceasefire deal. It's thought they'll be soldiers and civilians, all female. The terror group says it'll be in exchange for 180 Palestinian prisoners and detainees who were held by Israel. It'll be the second exchange since the ceasefire came into effect last Sunday. 3 hostages and 90 prisoners were released in that first swap. The Court of Appeal has ruled that the 3 judges who oversaw family court proceedings related to the care of Sarah Sharif can be named next week. A judge had earlier ruled they couldn't be named due to a real risk of harm to them from a virtual lynch mob. The media were previously allowed to report that Surrey County Council had concerns about Sarah's father, Irfan Sharif, as early as 2010, and that Sarah was involved in 3 sets of family court proceedings before she was murdered by Sharif and her stepmother, Bainash Batul, at their home in Surrey. Sharif and Batul were jailed for life for the 10-year-old's murder in December, with minimum terms of 40 years and 33 years. And a record number of children are living in B&Bs beyond the legal limit as England's homelessness crisis pushes councils to breaking point. MPs said there's a dire need for housing reform, with the lack of affordable homes forcing cash-strapped local authorities to hemorrhage their funds on temporary accommodation. The rising number of homeless households in England is making this situation anything but temporary. Length of stays has increased significantly in many areas since 2021, with particularly long stays in London and the South East. The data shows 6,000 of these households included children, of which 2 in 3 had been living there for longer than the 6-week legal limit. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. More from me in half an hour.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's now 8 minutes past midday, and people across the UK, well, many are being urged to stay indoors and avoid travel at all costs after Storm Aowyn rolls into town.
Yes, forecasters have issued a rare threat-to-life red weather warning across Scotland and Northern Ireland as wind speeds hit over 100 miles per hour.
Joining us now is our Northern Ireland reporter, Doogie Beattie, and our Scotland reporter, Tony Maguire. Doogie, we're going to start with you. Of course, the storm hit Northern Ireland first. What happened?
Well, at about 2 o'clock this morning, it hit Cork in the Republic of Ireland, travelling northwards. Winds of over 114 miles an hour recorded. That is the highest in Ireland's history. It did substantial damage, taking out much power lines, etc., on the way to Northern Ireland. About 6 o'clock this morning, we came on breakfast. The storm was really just hitting us. It followed a heavy shower of rain. That was on from about 3 o'clock in the morning. So the rain really stopped, and what really happened was massive gusts came in off the sea, and those gusts did substantial damage to buildings, power lines. 93,000 people without power in Northern Ireland. You can see right now, Tom, actually, if you look down this road, you will see that this is a rural area, and most of Northern Ireland actually is very rural. And if you look here, there's a power line coming down. The locals have been out with chainsaws cutting up the trees, but you'll see that this power line is actually through the trees. And if you just look over here, you will see the transformer, and on the other side of that transformer is maybe 100 houses coming off that power line. And worse than that is that most of those power cables on the way down that road, the tensioners on them have now gone. So the electricity service will not only have to fix the power, they'll have to reset those poles and pull them back into position again. And in fairness to the electricity service, since about November this year, they have been going around cutting back trees that were across power lines. But unfortunately, Northern Ireland, the population is rather a big place, and it will take time to do that. And it's like the Forth Bridge, they keep on having to go back and start all over again. But they're well used to putting the power back on. But of course, we are now only in really assessment and starting to deal with what's going on. You can hear alarms and stuff going off behind me. That's because the power is off those buildings. There is still substantial gusts of wind here, but really the storm has passed to Scotland.
Well, thank you for weathering the storm for us. I hope those power lines can be back and running very soon indeed. But let's turn to our Scotland reporter, Tony Maguire. Tony, you were looking a bit unsteady on your feet a little bit ago.
Yeah, that's pretty fair to say. The gusts here are really quite something, and of course the normal wind speeds, if you like, are round about 50 to 70, sometimes pushing a little higher. But it's the gusts that coming out of nowhere, reaching 80, 90, and in some parts of the country are going to reach 100 miles an hour. And of course that is being felt right across the country already. We've seen disruption here. I'm outside the community centre in Ayrshire in Troon, and over to my right you can see huge chunks of the roof that had blown off this morning, and then just up to my left, over the left shoulder, well, that's the hole where that came from. Some workers just before we came on air there moving it from the middle of the road over to the side. But certainly the Scotland and Southern Energy Network, though, they've already said that about 2,500 to 3,000 homes in Scotland already without power as Storm Aowyn moves right across the central belt. Such an unusual thing for the southern part of Scotland to really receive a red weather warning and a weather event of this magnitude. We've also heard recently that Ryanair, a flight, had led from Stansted and had tried to get to land in Edinburgh, but had to circle back, making Ryanair have to cancel their later flights to the capital. So it's moved all the way across Scotland now.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Tony Maguire. Stay safe in those gusts up to 100 miles per hour in Doogie Beatty there in Northern Ireland as well, where it seems for now to have calmed down a little bit anyway. Should we get what's going on, actually, in the weather system from meteorologist for the Met Office, Alex Birkhill? Alex, where has this weather come from then?
Well, this is a very deep area of low pressure, exceptionally deep. In fact, Northern Ireland has recorded its lowest pressure ever recorded in January, and at least the lowest since 1900 for any time of the year. So that's why we've seen such strong winds. And this low pressure has actually been driven by the cold air, the cold weather that's happening across America at the moment, because in America they have this very cold air that's led to a real contrast in temperatures, and that's strengthened the jet stream. A really strong jet has led to this rapid deepening of an area of low pressure that's head towards us, and it's this that is now Storm Aowyn.
So how long might this last? We've seen the most dramatic pictures, particularly across Ireland and Scotland. What's the potential of this storm? How much more is there to run?
Well, as your live reporter said, across Northern Ireland, we've seen the worst of it to an extent. The red warning expires in a couple of hours, so there will still be some further damaging winds for a time. But across Scotland, it's now that we're seeing the worst effects, and they will continue until mid to late afternoon. And then even then, the strong winds continue as we go into tomorrow across Scotland in particular. They won't be as strong, so we're not talking gusts of around 90 to 100 by the time that we get to this evening and overnight, but nonetheless, some further strong winds will continue. Further south, it's a very different story. Other parts of the UK might be wondering what all the fuss is about, because whilst it's a bit blustery, a bit windy, it's actually a largely fine day otherwise, but it's across northern areas where we are seeing these strong, damaging winds.
Yeah, and there's a real threat to life, isn't there, with gusts at these speeds, you know, up to 100 miles per hour. People really should, if they can, stay indoors.
Yes, you're right. So the advice, especially when you have a red warning, is for people to stay indoors if they can, because there is the risk of danger to life and damage to property. We've already seen the fact that there has been damage to property, and if you're caught out by a blown down tree or roofs being blown over, then that can cause some major problems. We see it in the past. These kind of storms are the type of storms that cause major problems and can have real serious effects. So if you can avoid traveling, stay inside, particularly during the red warning period, and even during the amber warning, if you can avoid traveling, that's the best advice.
We're looking at some pictures now of some pretty ferocious seas there on the Welsh coast. How much is this affecting that principality?
Yeah, so in Wales, we've also recorded gusts in excess of 90 miles per hour, so very strong winds there. Admittedly, that's in a coastal spot, so you do see very strong winds around exposed coastal areas in particular. But yes, 90 miles per hour, that is exceptionally strong even for the time of year. And I think that that's an interesting shot that you have there, because lots of people will be tempted. No, it's a storm, they say. Let's go out and experience it. Let's see what the waves are doing. Let's head to the coast. And that's really against the advice, because it's not worth putting yourself in that risk. Now, when we issue amber red warnings, we're not saying if you go outside, you will get hurt. And that's not the case. Everyone knows that. What we're saying is that there is a significant risk, and it's just not worth taking.
OK, Alex Birkhill, thank you so much, meteorologist for the Met Office. I must say, people say, you know, looking out the window, not much to see around here in London, but last night it was very loud. The windows were rattling. Rain, wind, pretty miserable weather. Nothing like, obviously, what we're seeing in Northern Ireland and parts of Wales and Scotland and the like. But I think the whole country seems to be experiencing a little.
Yeah, been shaken a little by it all. But as we've been hearing, all the advice is don't go out and chase these storms. Sit in and watch them on GB News instead.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Just hunker down, get a nice cup of coffee. Hopefully, you've still got your power. Do let us know if you don't, because that's a bit of a rubbish start to the weekend.
Well, how would they let us know?
They let us know. They've got a little bit of battery left.
Oh, goodness me. Well, let's move on now, because Wigan Council has voted for a national inquiry into grooming gangs. Well, this breaking with the Labour government's position, despite it being, of course, a Labour council.
OK, well, GB News reporter Charlie Peters is here to tell us more. Charlie, how significant is this, then, a Labour-run council voting against the government line?
Well, it's the second time it's happened this week, actually, because on Wednesday, Stockton Council also voted in favour of a national public inquiry into the grooming gang scandal, with both Tory and Labour members voting for that motion, which was passed 29 to 21. But this vote, just in the last hour or so, was unanimous. Not a single vote against it in a very heavily Labour-run council in Wigan, which is part of the Greater Manchester area. There are 64 Labour councillors in that council, 10 independents and 1 Tory, but all councillors present at the full council meeting today voted it forward. And the motion was brought forward by an independent called Maureen O'Byrne, who told GB News just in the last hour that she thinks that transparency and openness is absolutely vital for this process. And the reason she said that is because when she tried to have this motion read out on Wednesday night, she says that Labour councillors walked out of the meeting. I've seen some footage of this. They said they didn't want to have that debate. And again today, she was blocked from delivering her speech. They voted against her actually reading out the motion. They only voted on it. Now, that motion, I've read it. It's pretty powerful stuff. Refers to the sentencing of an Oxford grooming gang in 2013. Really horrifying details in that case. A particularly appalling example of just how atrocious and ferocious these abuse and rape gangs can be. But this vote, quite a significant moment, not least because in Greater Manchester, Lisa Nandy, the MP for Wigan, has been against calls for a national public inquiry. She said that she didn't agree with Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Manchester, who did come out in favour of a limited inquiry the day after Parliament voted down one on Wednesday, January the 8th.
This is quite interesting because, of course, the government has been promoting this sort of centrally funded but locally run approach to a number of these local inquiries, supporting them from the centre. I suppose the fact that this is local councillors saying, actually, that's not good enough. You're sort of passing the buck to us. It probably speaks to something that people in Westminster don't quite get, that maybe all of these local councils are feeling a bit burdened with this, and there needs to be more support than the Home Secretary has announced.
Two main concerns I've heard from local councillors across the country on what you're just raising there, Tom. First is cost. It's expensive to run a proper inquiry that goes back decades and looks at current problems as well into child sexual exploitation. Group-based offending is very intricate and detailed. It requires extensive powers to compel witnesses, and that's the second issue. If you don't compel witnesses, you don't get the full truth. If they're not given statutory powers, how do you get to the bottom of this crisis? These local inquiries won't have those powers. The Labour backbencher, Sarah Champion, the member for Rotherham, did raise those concerns when a couple of weeks ago the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, raised the announcement for these locally led inquiries. The government's going to put forward 5 more of them. They'll have funding of £5 million to do so. But the Telford inquiry, the model that they rely on, which was published in 2022, that cost well more than what's being allocated per inquiry at the moment. So a lot of questions there for the government to answer, and it seems that in some of these Labour-run local areas, they're actually disagreeing unanimously with the government's position.
It's fascinating. Well, Charlie Peters will be with you, of course, throughout the programme as this story develops. But for now, thanks for joining us.
OK, well, we've got a lot more coming up on today's show. On Good Afternoon Britain, the lead detective probing the Southport attack has revealed he wanted the mass murder to be declared terrorism. But the CPS said the killings didn't meet the legal requirements. Is Nigel Farage right to call for the DPP, the Director of Public Prosecutions, to resign?
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast every day from 6 a.m.
TikTok chefs, Instagram chefs, that they put children off or young people off of cooking because it's so expertly done they can't do it. No, My young lad, he's 17, he is amazing in the kitchen. Oh, he is. He's amazing in the kitchen. And he gets it all off TikTok. He comes down, he can put burgers, wraps, stews, curries, sauces, and the smells in the kitchen. I said, where'd you get these? Oh, just TikTok, I'm trying it out. And it's just amazing the things that he can conjure up. So for some people, it might be... it's an inspiration for him. So they're saying that it's intimidation. For my boy, it's an inspiration. They say it's entertainment. For my boy, it's an infomercial. I watch him doing his stuff. At that stage, I could do baked beans on toast and knock up a salad. That was it. But my boy can do all sorts of stuff.
It makes it accessible as well, doesn't it? Because lots of people say, like, you need an education to be in the kitchen, or you need to go find yourself loads of cookbooks. But you don't.
No.
You go on your phone now.
Well, I mean, like, all the spices, sesame oil. I mean, I'm amazed at the stuff that he does. So it's encouraging. All you just need is a kitchen well-stocked and have a go. And understand that failure is actually the route to learning. I mean, he's made mistakes, he's stuck stuff in the bin, but that young man, I am amazed at some of the stuff he does.
I don't mind cooking at all. It's cleaning up that I have the problem with. Dawn, let's talk about
Can
sex.
I just say there are things called restaurants, by the way? Just put that one. My hell, I don't even know where the kitchen is.
OK.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
OK, good afternoon, Britain. It is now 12:24. Now, of course, Axel Riddle-Buchanan has been jailed for life, a minimum term of 52 years. This is actually thought to be the longest punishment handed to a killer of his age.
But of course, it's hard to think of any other 17-year-old who's committed such an atrocity.
I think the judge wanted to go further, but within the law, he couldn't.
Well, the father of one of the girls murdered was heard calling out coward as Riddle-Buchanan was removed from court for shouting and screaming in the dock.
And of course, those present, including family members and victims, listened to emotional victim impact statements and finally the sentencing of the killer without him even being present.
Well, now the lead detective probing the Southport attack has revealed he wanted the mass murder to be declared as terrorism. But the Crown Prosecution Service said the killings didn't meet the legal requirements.
Yes, and as a result, Nigel Farage, for one, has actually gone as far as to say that the Director of Public Prosecutions at the CPS should resign over this, the failure to call it terrorism.
Well, let's speak to GB News political editor Chris Hope. He's been in Downing Street for us, talking to the government about this and many other issues. Firstly, Chris, what does the government make of the sentencing yesterday?
Yes, hi Tom, hi Emily, welcome to Downing Street. We've been speaking with my colleague Catherine Forster to the PM's deputy official spokesman. There's a few lines emerging from that briefing, I'll go through them quickly. The government has no plans, they say, to bring back capital punishment. Some MPs in Parliament, Lee Anderson and Rupert Lowe, notably from Reform UK, are saying that it should be brought back for the Southport killer. They're saying that there's no need to do that. They look at Ian Brady, the Moors murderer. They say that that killer, towards the end of his life, wished to get cancer because he was so haunted by the memory of what he'd done. So in the government's view, a 52-year term is enough. There's no need to bring back the capital punishment, no need for a free vote on the death penalty either. The issue of extending whole life terms for under 18s, locking up child killers for life. They can't do it currently, the government says, because of a UN convention on the rights of the child. They say, the government, they are bound by that. Kemi Badenoch, the Tory leader, she says she'll review that. It's not clear whether we're bound by that or whether we simply adhere to it. So that debate carries on. The issue of the sentence, 52 years minimum term for the Southport killer, that is now being looked at right now by the Attorney General's office. They've got 28 days to review it and then decide whether to take it on to the Court of Appeal. So we'll have an update on that within the month or so. And the public inquiry announced by the PM and Yvette Cooper earlier this week, that will conclude as quickly as possible. We asked, is that a 7-year term, as the PM said it would be for a grooming gangs public inquiry? They wouldn't give a timeline. They want to speak to the families first and look at their feelings, and also set out the timetable shortly and the terms of reference, and appoint someone to chair that. And also, we understand at GB News that the review of Prevent and the failures that we were discussing on the programme already, that could come as soon as next week. Now, in my podcast, Chopper's Political Podcast, I asked the former Security Minister, Tom Tugendhat, about those failures and whether, in fact, Prevent was fit for purpose. Here's what he had to say.
Is it fit for purpose? Bits. Would you scrap it?
No, I wouldn't. I would improve it.
By?
Well, but this is where I would look at the Shawcross report, and there's a huge amount in there that we were able to get done, and there's bits that we weren't able to get done because they take time to introduce. And part of it is about making sure you're triaging properly. So you're getting stuff in line in the appropriate way and you're responding appropriately. Because I'm afraid, I think there has been, by some people, there has been an attempt to balance these things. You know, we've got to be frank. You know, where the violence is coming from, the Islamist terrorism that we're seeing is really serious. Yes, of course, there's far-right terrorism. Yes, of course, there's so-called incel, you know, loner terrorism. This is why we need the inquiry.
We'll find out in the inquiry. I get it. Okay. Is criticising knife sales by Amazon a distraction? I mean, there are knives and kitchen drawers around the country.
Yeah, look, you know, we're never going to ban knives, right?
No.
That's never going to happen. So we need to get better at identifying triggers, as it were, on people, and when people have radicalised themselves or been radicalised, to find out where we're going. That's why the prevent aspect is so important.
So Tom Tugendhat there, he of course was Security Minister 2022 to 2024, and those 3 warnings went to the government, the last Tory government, in 2019 and 2021. So he says we need a triage service, but nothing more than that. But clearly it isn't working as it should do, and that'll be looked at in this review. It may come back as soon as next week. And one final line for you both on the issue of Donald Trump. Of course, he was sworn in on Monday. As things stand, no phone call yet between Sir Keir Starmer and Donald Trump. I don't think the US President has done any calls with other world leaders, but as things stand, we have a special relationship. No phone call yet with the Prime Minister. The spokesman told us the PM would welcome the opportunity to speak at the earliest opportunity. The Prime Minister looks forward to speaking to him soon. No phone call yet between London and Washington.
It's been a week.
It's been ages.
That's surprising. That is surprising. Well, Chopper, thanks for the very, very latest there, live from Downing Street.
Tom, can I get your thoughts on this?
Yeah.
OK, so Chopper said there that the government can't extend whole life terms to under 18s because we're restricted by UN laws, the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. Now, I just double-checked, Iraq is a member of the UN, and they've just made child marriage acceptable. Or at least they're trying to. It seems like we are so bound by these conventions, these laws, in a way that no other country is. I'm not saying we should be like Iraq, obviously. That is not what I'm saying here. But it's so... We're always so meticulously players by these international laws.
I think to steel man, to coin a phrase, the government's position here, what the government and particularly the Foreign Commonwealth Development Office lawyers will say is that we want to be able to say to countries like Iraq, you shouldn't do child marriage. Look, we abide by these rules, you should abide by them too.
Why should the UN decide what the rules are?
Well, it's sort of what was written into the Fundamental Charter of Human Rights back in the 50s.
It's like all these awful regimes just do whatever they like.
Yeah.
Then when there is potentially room for a sensible discussion about whole life orders in the case of such monstrous crimes as these that happen to be a few days before the person turns 18, oh, we can't do that, we'll upset the UN.
Yeah.
It does seem a bit... I don't know.
It does seem odd, especially given that, and I know this is a bit of a tangent, but whenever Labour Party politicians say we should give 16-year-olds the vote, they say, at 16 you can join the army.
Very good point.
But of course, you can't fight for the army under the conditions of the UN Charter of Fundamental Rights of the Child. Child soldiers are against international law. So really what you mean when you say you can join the army is you can train, but of course you can't be deployed until you're 18. So that really does put a pin in the balloon of votes at 16, but
all this
still going to
stuff
happen.
contradicts itself.
Yeah.
Well, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Let us know your thoughts as always, but we've got a lot more coming up as well. It does appear as though the high street may well be dying. Supermarket giant Sainsbury's has announced over 3,000 job cuts, and Primark, which is supposed to be a budget-friendly, shop, they've reported a rare plunge in their sales during the crucial Christmas quarter. What's going on? It's certainly bad news for Rachel Reeves.
Good afternoon. The top stories from the GB newsroom as Storm Aowyn sweeps across the UK, bringing record-breaking winds and severe weather conditions. Many travellers are facing the uncertainty of potential flight delays or cancellations. Millions of people have been urged to stay home. Forecasters have flagged a rare threat to life red weather warning. Over 4 million people across Northern Ireland and Scotland received emergency alerts from the Met Office last night with guidance on how to stay safe. More than 715,000 homes, farms and businesses are without power across the Republic of Ireland today. A wind speed of 114 miles per hour brought by the storm has been recorded in Ireland, the fastest since records began. 20,000 Scottish Power customers across the centre and south of the country are without electricity due to the storm. Local authorities are warning commuters to avoid travel at all costs. The Southport child killer will likely die behind bars after murdering 3 girls at a dance class, but his 52-year sentence has sparked calls for law changes. Axel Rudikabana received one of the highest minimum custody terms on record for the attack at a dance class in Southport in July last year when he was 17 years old. Alistair Silva Aguirre, BB King and Elsie Dot Stankham were killed, and harrowing details of the attack were heard at Liverpool Crown Court yesterday. However, Southport's Labour MP Patrick Hurley said the sentence was not severe enough, and he asked the Attorney-General to review it as unduly lenient. Due to Rudikabana's age at the time of the attack, he cannot legally receive a whole life order. While this afternoon, the head of the UK's largest police force has welcomed a review of contempt of court laws and said it would be great if more information in cases could be shared at an earlier stage. Wigan Council has voted for a national inquiry into the grooming gang scandal, breaking with the Labour government's position. The local authority, which is Labour-led, unanimously voted through a motion requesting that a full national inquiry is undertaken. The motion said the abuse had destroyed the lives of tens of thousands of teenage girls, adding that an inquiry would provide justice for the young girls who've suffered and identify preventative measures moving forward. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. More news in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. The Republic of Ireland recorded its strongest wind gust on record because of Storm Aowyn, and for Northern Ireland, the strongest winds since 1998. And those winds are now moving into Scotland, so winds continuing to pick up across the central belt with the risk of 80 to 90 mile per hour gusts, and in some of the most exposed spots, 100 mile per hour gusts for parts of Northern Ireland into central and southwest Scotland during the afternoon. Now, as the afternoon progresses, the strongest sway the winds will push north, associated with the band of rain and hill snow for Scotland. Brighter skies elsewhere, and actually much less windy for England and Wales. There will be some cloud and some outbreaks of rain towards the far southeast. Otherwise, a largely more settled end to the day for England and Wales. Just a few showers about, but for central and northern Scotland, well, the winds will continue to increase into the evening as the storm shifts north. So we can expect gusts of 80, perhaps 90 mile per hour wind gusts before the day is out for the far north of Scotland. Northern Ireland, by this stage, the worst is over. England and Wales, as I say, it's going to be much less windy by the end of the day. Some showers moving through Wales and the southwest. That could lead to a few gusty winds in places, but overall the winds are easing overnight for England and Wales, as well as central and southern Scotland and Northern Ireland. The worst will be over by this stage. Showers and some snow falling out of those showers in the north because it's going to be a cold start to Saturday. Widespread frost, some patches of ice around as well. Amber warning for northern Scotland expires Saturday morning, and so the winds by this stage are coming down, and the strongest winds, the gales, are largely confined to the far north of Scotland. Elsewhere, a bright enough day with lighter winds for England and Wales, further showers and blustery winds coming into Northern Ireland and western parts later, and then another low comes on Sunday, not quite as bad as Aowyn.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. The M74 in South Lanarkshire is closed northbound between junctions 13 and 11 from Abington to Ponehill after a lorry overturned, causing delays. There are a number of road closures in Northern Ireland because of fallen trees. The M2 is blocked each way between the M22 and junction 5 at Temple Patrick. The A6 is closed off the A57 in Temple Patrick. The A1 is closed each way between Drumore and Ashfield, and the A24 is closed along Church Road at Ballynahinch. In Gwynedd, the A55 is closed each way over the Britannia Bridge to and from the Isle of Anglesey because of strong winds, with diversions over the Menai Bridge. On the M1 in Derbyshire, 2 lanes are closed northbound for repairs between junctions 28 and 29 near Mansfield, taking around half an hour in the queues. And on the M25 in Kent, 3 out of 4 lanes are closed anti-clockwise after an accident and fuel spill in junctions 3 and 2 from the M20 to the A2, with queues from junction 4 at Orpington.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 38 minutes past midday, and it's a new low for British consumer confidence as major retails record shocking losses.
Yes, OK. Well, over the Christmas period, high street favourite Primark recorded a 6% fall in sales, and now the supermarket chain Sainsbury's are cutting 3,000 jobs.
It's a tough time to be in the retail sector, particularly because the cost of employing people, particularly those on lower incomes, has shot up in the wake of the budget. Let's join now consumer and retail expert Helen Dewdney. Helen, this is a tough time, particularly for the retail sector.
Absolutely, and we've definitely seen over that Christmas period sort of the consumer confidence drop, really, and those sales go down. But of course, we are still living in a cost of living crisis where people are cutting back anyway.
Yeah, and Helen, consumer confidence is basically how willing you are to go out and spend money, or how able you are, how much money you're spending in the high street or online or wherever you spend your money. And it looks like it's not doing too well, which of course is very bad for businesses. Interesting about Primark, though. So Primark seems to always do quite well. It keeps its costs quite low. It charges not a lot of money for items that people tend to want. Clothing mostly. Why do you think they've suffered?
It's an interesting one, isn't it? It might be the signs that others are going to follow. As you say, Primark is unusual in saying that it's going to be slowly growing rather than faster than they thought originally. Again, it's probably still people cutting back at Christmas. It could also be that we're seeing a growth in second-hand shopping. So we're seeing a huge increase on those sites like Vinted and Depot. So it could well be that actually people are turning away from fast fashion as well. It could possibly be an element of that too.
That is so interesting, because it always used to be said that companies like Primark were more or less recession-proof. As the more expensive brands, people cut down on them, they might switch to the cheaper brands. But that seems to be a trend that is turning away. I wonder, though, looking at the Sainsbury's announcement, these 3,000 job losses, frankly, it's hard to pin this on anything other than the budget, given that the national insurance contributions employers will have to pay, particularly for employees on lower wages, and of course the minimum wage rises as well. I mean, employing someone on a till has become a lot more expensive.
Yeah, but you have also got to remember that Sainsbury's actually put their staff salary up more than inflation, so they are on more than the minimum wage. So, and we also know that when you put salaries up more than inflation, that can fuel inflation. So you do have to wonder about that move. And obviously none of us are going to knock staff being paid more, but there is that knock-on, like, actually, you've put the salary up of these people, so you're going to have to take it away from here. So there are some other underlying questions there, I think.
OK, well, Helen Dewdney, thank you very much indeed, consumer and retail expert. Not a great picture out there, is it, all of these job losses? Catherine did say that, though, that she thinks it's because Primark have put their prices up so much that you're actually better off going elsewhere, paying a couple of quid more to get better quality.
Oh, have the prices gone up recently?
I don't know. But I do know that I use Vinted quite a lot. I can get, clothes for a fraction of the price, still with the tags on.
And this is the app where people can sort of sell their old clothes, and people can it's up recycling.
Might have even got this frock off Vinted. Who knows? Can't remember. Maybe.
Oh,
yeah. It's a good place to go.
I haven't tried it out yet. I know my sister is a prodigious user of it, but
yeah, it's more women friendly, I think. Although some men use it. Why not, Tom? Get yourself a new suit.
Give it a go, or a dress. Well, now if you're in search for some winter sun, I won't. Here's the forecast for some of those top European holiday destinations.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries. All sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Unsettled at times across western parts of Europe. This includes Portugal, Spain and parts of northwest France. We're likely to see some heavy rain, also some strong winds at times. Largely settled across Tenerife, but Madeira, parts of Portugal, Spain, northwestern France could see some showers merging into longer spells of rain at times, and also some strong winds. As we head further east, largely settled across Rome and also parts of Greece, but a chance we could see some showers here as we head into next week, with the best of the temperatures across Tenerife.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight. Every night from 11 p.m.
We've got the Daily Mail now with the latest in the court case over whether a man is a woman or a man. It's a tough question. And J.K. Rowling has given her opinion. I think I can guess what it is, Cressida.
Explosive twist in Australia's What is a Woman trans battle as Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling gets involved. So this is the court case Giggle versus Tickle. Tickle was a...
He's Mr. Men.
That's right. It's a Mr. Men trans battle.
Kind of is a Mr. Man.
It was a women's group, wasn't it? Tickle, Giggles... Oh, I get it wrong. Giggles for girls. And Roxy Tickle, who is a trans woman, wanted to join this group and wasn't allowed, was banned for being a biological male, and then sued and amazingly got $10,000 for this, which is already extraordinary to me.
Yeah.
But it's now doubling down and is going to file a cross appeal seeking to upgrade the judgment.
Yeah.
So Roxy has come back for another bite of the cherry.
And I've had a look at this Roxanne Tickle, the trans woman.
Pretty?
No, not one of the pretty ones. Not a Blair White. Just looks like, to be honest, it looks like
you could be sued for $10,000.
Looks like one of us.
Yeah.
To be honest, no. Like I mean, I'll happily.
For yourself.
No, I think it's an absolute. It's a farce, and it's making a mockery of not just. It's not just making a mockery of women's right to have their own spaces. It's making a mockery of genuine trans people who actually put some effort in and look like a woman.
What do you mean a genuine trans
And also,
people?
if
We don't believe in that.
No, if your name was Roxanne, if you were going to transition, you wouldn't pick the name Roxanne Tickle.
What?
You choose Tess.
Tess. That's a kind of name. No, the truth is that's one of the problems, is you get a choice in the name you're going to choose. And of course, you're going to choose like a hot Roxanne. That's a hot Roxanne. That's a great name. They're not going to choose.
You don't think
Louis.
Tess would work better with Tickle?
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes and Co weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's just gone 1:45. Now, 270,000 people have signed a petition to overturn the controversial family farm tax.
Well, joining us now is political correspondent Catherine Forster, who's on Downing Street. Catherine, what's happening?
Yes, good morning. Over 250,000 people have signed this petition against the government's inheritance tax changes to farmers. I'm joined now by Tom Bradshaw, the NFU president, and by Aled Jones from NFU Cymru. Tom, can you tell us what you're doing here and what your next plans are to make the government listen? They say that this is a fair deal for farmers.
I think they're the only ones who think it is a fair deal now. This week we've seen the supermarkets all come out saying they've got serious concerns for the resilience of our food supply systems because of the changes being proposed to inheritance tax. Over 270,000 people have supported our petition. We'd like to thank every one of them for their support. It means so much to the farming industry. But food production is something that everyone in this country relies on. And unfortunately, the confidence of the industry has been absolutely broken. Nobody wants to invest for the future. And without that investment, there is no food security. So our next step tomorrow is a day of unity right the way across the United Kingdom. There'll be over 100 events where farmers are out there thanking the public for their support and trying to help them understand why this tax is so unjust and why we can't afford to pay it.
One of the things that you're particularly worried about is elderly farmers who may have less than 7 years to live and therefore could not potentially pass their farms over in the meantime. Tell us about that specifically and what you want the government to do with them.
Those people that are in our community that have given a lifetime to producing this country's food have no ability to plan. We've got 94-year-olds that still own the farm because until the 30th of October, the very best tax advice was to keep the farm until death. They have no ability to plan their way through this. The abhorrent changes proposed are completely inhumane. Even the Office for Budget Responsibility, the OBR, this week came out highlighting their concerns that the elderly generation don't have an ability to plan. Putting those people in that position is completely unfair, and we have to get the government to urgently look at changing the proposals so that we can take them out of the eye of this storm.
And Aled Jones, do you feel that this government perhaps just fundamentally doesn't understand farming? Does it just not get it, or is it different to that?
You know, we were told a while ago that family farms were integral to this country, and farming, delivering on food security was an essential part of national security. And farmers really took those messages and they were proud to deliver for this country. But there's a sense of betrayal. There's a sense of betrayal at the moment to think that those historic contribution that Tom mentioned that the farmers have made to this country is now being taken away from them. The breakup of family farms will be devastating for this country.
Thank you very much for talking to us today on GB News. So a sense of betrayal, that is what we're hearing that farmers feel about the way they're being treated by this government. The government, of course, say that they're spending £5 billion over the next couple of years invested in farming. Cold comfort that for a lot of farmers at the moment. But back to you.
Catherine Forster, live from Downing Street. Thank you very much for that report.
270,000 signatures.
Yeah,
not
huge.
bad, eh? Anyway, in other news, US President Donald Trump, he's signed a handful of executive orders in the Oval Office, including documents related to three of the most consequential assassinations in US history.
Yes, the killings of JFK, RFK and MLK. That's John Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy and Martin Luther King Jr., all within just a few years of one another, all in the same year. Were they not? Well, let's listen in.
That's a big one, huh? A lot of people are waiting for this for years, for decades. And everything will be revealed.
Making swift work of that.
Yeah, indeed. Well, with us now is Greg Swenson, the chair of Republicans Overseas UK. Greg, these assassinations, all in the 60s, had huge cultural and political consequences.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm of the age where everyone remembers where they were when they happened. Now, granted, I was one when JFK was assassinated, but it is probably three of the biggest moments in American history. And so, 68 was such a difficult year. 63, not so much, and that was just a shock to the nation and the world. Whereas 68 was, a really crazy year in American and world history.
You had Vietnam protests. Right. You had a president seeking re-election who then stood down from seeking re-election. You had a fervent atmosphere, protests and violence on the streets.
Chicago riots at the Democrat convention in the summer. Yeah, it was a crazy year, and I think those two moments were, sort of exclamation points.
So why is Trump doing this then?
Well, he's all for transparency. It's amazing to see the difference between the Biden administration and the Trump administration. They want transparency. They think the voters should know, what happened. Whereas, in the Biden administration, they were censoring any conversations about COVID and lockdowns and the source of the virus. I mean, anything that they didn't want the people to know, they censored.
But don't we know exactly what happened? I mean, Lee Harvey Oswald shot JFK.
Yeah.
We know that a Palestinian migrant shot RFK.
Right.
And we know that a racist shot Martin Luther King Jr.
Sure, and I think that might be the very truth, and that might be what we read when these reports are released. But there's been so much speculation about what happened or what really happened. So we don't know. And of course, Lee Harvey Oswald was killed a day or two later, in broad daylight with security everywhere. I mean, how someone got in and was able to shoot the guy. So
there's so many conspiracies.
Yeah.
But is there a chance this will upset conspiracy theorists if actually what has been hidden all these years is the official and public explanation?
Yeah, I would think so. And then they'll say that that the report's doctored, and who knows. But I'm not really losing any sleep on this. It's not. I mean, it'll be interesting, especially if there's some differences between what the report says and what history has said. So
well, I approve of showing these things. Transparency is always good. Openness. Greg Swenson, will have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed. Right, we've got lots more coming up, so do stick with us. Yes, it's been described as the worst storm of the century. That's Storm Aowyn. That's battering Britain as we speak. Hurricane-force winds expected to reach up to 100 miles per hour in some parts of the country. I mean, look at those scenes. You wouldn't want to go out in that, would you? What can you do instead, Tom?
Well, what you can do instead is sit inside, watch GB News and stay with us, not only for Storm, but much more, including your very latest weather forecast.
Despite the morning rain, it'll be a nice, warm, cosy day ahead. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. The Republic of Ireland recorded its strongest wind gust on record because of Storm Aowyn, and for Northern Ireland, the strongest winds since 1998. And those winds are now moving into Scotland, so winds continuing to pick up across the central belt with the risk of 80 to 90 mile per hour gusts, and in some of the most exposed spots, 100 mile per hour gusts for parts of Northern Ireland into central and southwest Scotland during the afternoon. Now, as the afternoon progresses, the strongest sway the winds will push north, associated with the band of rain and hill snow for Scotland. Brighter skies elsewhere, and actually much less windy for England and Wales. There will be some cloud and some outbreaks of rain towards the far southeast. Otherwise, a largely more settled end to the day for England and Wales. Just a few showers about, but for central and northern Scotland, well, the winds will continue to increase into the evening as the storm shifts north. So we can expect gusts of 80, perhaps 90 mile per hour wind gusts before the day is out for the far north of Scotland. Northern Ireland, by this stage, the worst is over. England and Wales, as I say, it's going to be much less windy by the end of the day. Some showers moving through Wales and the southwest. That could lead to a few gusty winds in places, but overall the winds are easing overnight for England and Wales, as well as central and southern Scotland and Northern Ireland. The worst will be over by this stage. Showers and some snow falling out of those showers in the north because it's going to be a cold start to Saturday. Widespread frost, some patches of ice around as well. Amber warning for northern Scotland expires Saturday morning, and so the winds by this stage are coming down, and the strongest winds, the gales, are largely confined to the far north of Scotland. Elsewhere, a bright enough day with lighter winds for England and Wales, further showers and blustery winds coming into Northern Ireland and western parts later, and then another low comes on Sunday, not quite as bad as Aowyn.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Imagine how £50,000 in cash from us could make your new year go with a bang.
Hi, my name's Victoria. I won the Spring Great British Giveaway.
So the day we got the money in our bank account, everything just felt a lot lighter. I would say if you're thinking about entering, just enter.
For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
First, mate, we had lockdowns. Then we had soaring energy costs. Then we had a hike in national insurance for employers. Then we had soaring wage costs. And now the government expects people like you to monitor what people say in boozers. And if you don't, you might get sued. I bet you feel like saying cheers to them, don't you?
Look, it just looks like another war on pubs, you know. Remember, they tried to stop smoking outside as well. Luckily, they rethought that. But look, we've got everything stacked against us, Martin, and the last thing I need to do is go and get in people's conversations. At the end of the day, a pub is like an extension to your home. You know, it's a public house. Friends go to speak, friends go to meet, unwind after work. It's none of my business what you're talking about. Any good publican, and myself included, anyone that was rude to anyone or on purpose, they want to offend people or they want to dig people out, antagonise them, of course I'm going to step in and say, behave yourself or you go. But look, how can I be on social media talking about everything, transgender, immigration, and people not be allowed to do that at the bar or do that at the table of a pub? It's ridiculous. And these ministers really do need to sort of look at this legislation and see where it could lead, because I'm not going to stop anyone speaking in my pub. Again, if they're trying to antagonise people or they're rude or trying to start trouble, they get thrown out the front door, and any publican worth their salt is going to do that as well. But we're not there to police people's conversations.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 1 o'clock on Friday, the 24th of January. I'm Emily Carver.
And I'm Tom Harwood.
Well, it's been described as the worst storm of the century. That's Storm Aowyn that's battering Britain today, with hurricane-force winds expected to reach up to 100 miles per hour in some parts of the country. Our reporters are there on the ground.
Well, yes, winds of 114 miles an hour, traffic disruption, and overall clean-up operation now in process, but the storm gusts are still here.
I'm quite happy to hear that it's died down in Northern Ireland, but that is not the case for the west coast of Scotland, getting absolutely battered here by Storm Aowyn, and it's only got several hours to go.
What, Tony? What have we done to him?
Tony, you're doing sterling work. Elsewhere, a life behind bars for the Southport killer. Axel Rudakabana will likely die in prison. He receives a 52-year sentence for the murder of 3 little girls. But are you satisfied we know enough about this monster's motivation?
And after serving the country in the Falklands and in Iraq, the 1st Battalion Grenadier Guards are returning to Buckingham Palace to be inspected to ensure they are ready to take up ceremonial public duties for His Majesty the King.
Well, Storm Aowyn, it's
Aowyn.
It's a difficult word to say, isn't it?
Aowyn.
Can't we just call it Bill?
Apparently it's a name that features a lot in The Lord of the Rings. So our producers have told us.
Yeah, I'm going to out myself here as someone who has not sat through and watched all of the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, I did try, but I did tend to fall asleep. I know people absolutely love it.
I love The Hobbit. I read The Hobbit a lot as a child.
I read The Hobbit too.
But I never got on to Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
I mean,
fantasy
if we
doesn't
called
really do
this
it for me
storm
either.
Bilbo, it would be a lot easier. I mean...
There probably has been one called Bilbo, Storm Bilbo.
I don't know.
I'm a bit worried about Tony Maguire, though.
Yes, I mean, he's doing...
Our Scotland reporter.
What a trooper.
Yeah, I hope he's going to find somewhere, in between his hits to rest, get a bit of warmth. It must be a little bit cold out there.
No, it does. It's one of those moments where sitting in a warm, studio.
I know, we get
in
the easy
London,
job today, don't we?
Yeah.
It's been a tough week, though, hasn't it? Are you glad, like me, that it's Friday? Just because it's been a heavy week of news, of course, with the Southport killer and that trial. We've also been covering grooming gangs and the scandal around that for a long time now. Heavy news.
Yeah.
Heavy news.
No, certainly. And I did have to sort of take a moment after yesterday's show just to sort of decompress after it all. I mean, it was really staggering. I think it's one of the days in this job that I think I'm going to remember for a very, very long time indeed.
Yeah, and the amount of messages coming in throughout the afternoon, praising and thanking Sophie Reaper and Mark White for their sterling work. They were non-stop, and some of the details they will have heard would have, shocked anyone. So a thank you to them as well, from you to them. There you go. But get in touch. We are still concerned about whether we know enough about the motivations behind this monster killer, though. We seem to have accepted that, yes, he was obsessed with violence, obsessed with genocide and killings, and was interested in people like Hitler and the like. But do we know why he targeted little girls, especially? Why he went to that particular dance class? GBNews.com/your say. Please do get in touch on anything we're talking about today. But it's the news headlines with Tatiana.
Emily, thank you very much. We start with some breaking news this hour that a mother whose 4 young boys died in a fire after she left them home alone to go to Sainsbury's has been jailed for 10 years. Devika Rose had left her 2 sets of twins in the locked terrace house when the fatal blaze broke out on the evening of the 16th of December 2021. The 30-year-old, who suffered from mental health problems, was previously found guilty of 4 counts of manslaughter following trial. Rose and the 4 children had been living in squalor before the tragedy. Storm Aowyn is sweeping across the UK, bringing record-breaking winds and severe weather conditions. 1 in 5 flights from airports in the UK and Ireland have been cancelled today. Millions of people been urged to stay home. Forecasters have flagged a rare threat-to-life red weather warning. Over 4 million people across Northern Ireland and Scotland received emergency alerts from the Met Office last night with guidance on how to stay safe. More than 715,000 homes, farms and businesses are without power across the Republic of Ireland today. A wind speed of 114 miles per hour brought by the storm has been recorded in Ireland, the fastest since records began. 20,000 Scottish Power customers across the centre and south of the country are without electricity due to the storm. Local authorities have warned commuters to avoid travel at all costs. The Southport child killer will likely die behind bars after murdering 3 little girls at a dance class, but his 52-year sentence has sparked calls for law changes. Axel Rudakabana received one of the highest minimum custody terms on record for the attack at a dance class in Southport in July last year, when he was 17 years old. Alistair Silva Aguirre, B.B. King and Elsie Stankham were killed, and harrowing details of the attack were heard in court yesterday. However, Southport's Labour MP Patrick Hurley said that sentence was not severe enough, and he asked the Attorney-General to review it as unduly lenient. Due to Rudakabana's age at the time of the attack, he cannot legally receive a whole life order. Well, the head of the UK's largest police force has today welcomed a review of contempt of court laws and said it would be great if more information in cases could be shared at an earlier stage. Defence Secretary John Healey told GB News Axel Rudakabana did not get a whole life sentence because international law prevented it.
The technicality of the whole life sentences, I think it's important to know that the last government did reduce it to 18 in line with international law after the Manchester Arena bombings, and that still stands. There are a range of other aspects of law, of agencies who have failed in this case to step in They knew about this man's extreme violence, but they failed to take any steps that might have prevented it. And there may be changes also in the programmes that are designed to deal with this sort of extremism. That's what the inquiry, now the court case has finished, which was launched this week, will do.
In other news, Wigan Council has voted for a national inquiry into the grooming gang scandal, breaking with the Labour government's position. The local authority, which is Labour-led, unanimously voted through a motion requesting that full national inquiry is undertaken. The motion said abuse had destroyed the lives of tens of thousands of teenage girls, adding that an inquiry would provide justice for the young girls who've suffered and identify preventative measures moving forward. Hamas is expected to hand over to Israel the names of 4 hostages to be released tomorrow under the Gaza ceasefire deal. It's thought they'll be soldiers and civilians, all female. The terror group says it'll be in exchange for 180 Palestinian prisoners and detainees who are held by Israel. This will be the second exchange since the ceasefire came into effect last Sunday. 3 hostages and 90 prisoners were released in the first swap. And the Court of Appeal has ruled that the 3 judges who oversaw family court proceedings related to the care of Sarah Sharif can be named next week. A judge had earlier ruled they couldn't be named due to a real risk of harm to them from a virtual lynch mob. The media were previously allowed to report that Surrey County Council had concerns about Sarah's father, Irfan Sharif, as early as 2010, and that Sarah was also involved in 3 sets of family court proceedings before she was murdered by her father and her stepmother, Bainash Batul, at their home in Surrey. Sharif and Batul were jailed for life for the 10-year-old's murder in December with minimum terms of 40 years and 33 years. Those are the latest headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More in half an hour.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 9 minutes past 1. Now, people in the UK are being urged to stay indoors and avoid travel at all costs as Storm Aowyn rolls into town.
That's a different pronunciation. We've had 3 different ones today.
Aowyn, are you in? Aowyn?
Aowyn, yeah. Forecasters are issuing a rare threat to life, a red weather warning across Scotland and Northern Ireland because wind speeds are hitting over 100 miles per hour.
Well, joining us now is Northern Ireland reporter Doogie Beattie from Northern Ireland and Scotland reporter Tony Maguire, who's in Wales. No, I'm joking, he's in Scotland. Doogie, we're going to start with you. What's it like where you are?
Yes, well, welcome to Northern Ireland. This morning we had winds of over 100 miles an hour hitting us. It made land in Cork in the Republic of Ireland at 2 o'clock this morning. There has been substantial power outages across the whole island of Ireland. Serious damage to properties, trees down causing disruption to transportation. But even in the last 10 minutes since we've been standing here, I mean, Strangford Lough, you could actually see the white horses the whole way across it. It is not as bad as it was 10 minutes ago. Not to say that there is still not severe gusts here, but nowhere near what was happening this morning. And really, people have stayed at home. Not even a shopping centre is open, no schools open. I mean, it brings me back to the times of COVID. Driving along the roads here, no one about. No one walking through the towns, and it was nearly impossible to actually get petrol for the car. So, I mean, that's how seriously the government was taking these storms and what was going to happen. It wasn't needed to be all that, but with the amount of trees and telegraph poles down, there would have definitely been serious traffic disruption if the traffic had kept on here. But really, we're now out looking and seeing what damage has been done from this morning. That storm has now crossed across the Irish Sea and is with Tony in Scotland.
It's looking pretty gusty to me, Doogie. Stay safe out there. Let's turn to our Scotland reporter, Tony Maguire. Oh dear, Tony.
I've worked better jobs in my life. Let's just go with that one. But certainly Storm Aowyn has very much made landfall here in Scotland. I've actually had to sit down and angle my body around just to somewhat protect the microphone so that you can all hear me back at home. And as Dougie said there, some of these gusts going up to 100 miles an hour here on mainland Scotland. Quite unusual that such a weather event hits Scotland this far down. Of course, the Highlands used to everything and anything that Mother Nature throws at it. As you can just see behind me here, and we're at Troon on the Ayrshire coast, and those waves, some of them 20, 30 feet tall, crashing right over the seawall here. And already, as Dougie said as well, all the shops are shut here. We're starting to query whether there's actually power out here, because of course 22,000 homes across Scotland being reported to be without power, and right along the Slee front you can hardly see any lights. You would imagine that people staying warm in their homes would have a few lights on for themselves as well. Now, even in our time here, we've had everything thrown at us. In fact, on the streets, I would say the wheelie bins are outnumbering the people about 10 to 1. And all the roof tiles that have come down as well as a lot of people's gardens completely blown to bits, as you might say. But I will say the one good thing that's come out of this, as a bit of a Lord of the Rings fan, Aowyn, of course, she was the mighty defeater of the Nazgul King, and I must say, for all of this, to have that little Lord of the Rings strand over the course of today has been keeping me a little warm. Nowhere near warm enough though, but of course, Storm Aowyn, another 4 hours before that red weather warning lifts here in Scotland.
Tony, what a majestic performance. And you've put me to shame with your Lord of the Rings knowledge as well. Thank you so much for being there and taking the battering wind for us. Do get inside, get warm, stay safe.
Yeah, please do. It does look like it's pretty dangerous out there, so do stay inside unless you happen to be a GB News reporter.
Yeah.
You've got to do it, hey? But you need to go home this weekend and read up on your Lord of the Rings. I feel like most young men of your age know a lot about Lord of the Rings.
I think I can do 1 or 2 facts. I just can't pronounce the names.
Just the names. Just the names are...
I can say Sauron.
Sauron, yes.
Yeah. I can say Bilbo, Gollum. How many more should we go through?
I don't know any others, so...
Well, there's also the one that the storm's called that I've mispronounced about 3 times so far this show.
Well, should we see if Director and Meteorologist for Weather Trending John Hammond can pronounce the name of the storm and tell us a little bit more about it?
I can pronounce it, I can't spell it. That's a difficult thing, isn't it? Yeah. Aowyn it is. It's the 5th storm, and of course, as we all know, the storms are named sequentially, so you can't have Bilbo. Bilbo was Bert, and that was a month or 2 back. So we're on Aowyn. Don't ask me what the letter F is. If we get the next storm, it'll be the letter F, but I can't remember the name that storm will have.
Frodo!
But Aowyn is pretty much doing more or less exactly what it was expected to do. So it tore through the Republic of Ireland, as we saw, with gusts over 100 miles an hour. The worst is over now across the island of Ireland. The worst is still to come, I'm afraid, for the heart of Scotland. So over the next, 2, 3, 4 hours, this is where those 90, possibly 100-mile-an-hour gusts will rip through the heart of central Scotland. That's of real concern, because inland areas seeing those sorts of gusts, highly populated areas too, that could well cause major problems, damage, disruption, power outages. Thankfully, because of the red warning, there aren't many people, as we've heard, there aren't many people out and about. And if you are hunkering down, then stay hunkered down through the afternoon, because we've got a little while yet before the worst of those winds move away from the central belt. If you live across the north of Scotland, actually, you're a flat calm at the moment. And the reason you're flat calm is because you're in the eye of the storm. But don't be fooled, because the storm moves away, so those winds actually will increase. So the red warning continues till 5 o'clock this afternoon, but the amber warning continues well on into the evening and night across Scotland. This is the place that's going to get battered through the rest of the day. Other areas for Northern England, Ireland, Northern Ireland, things gradually easing through the afternoon, still very windy. If you're living across London, Southern England, you're wondering what all the fuss is about, because as predicted, the focus of this storm was always going to be across the north and the west of the country, and that's the way it has panned out. Tomorrow, complete transformation. It'll be calm, it'll be frosty, it'll be still, but by Sunday, the next beast coming in off the Atlantic. Now, it won't be as vicious as Aowyn, but I think there will be more wind and rain. Just one to flag up. One to watch later on this weekend and into Monday. It might be a rainmaker rather than a wind maker. So things not really settling down for any lengthy period of time just yet.
Oh, I see. Yeah, the weather forecast has changed a little bit, hasn't it? I'm just looking. Tomorrow is going to be quite a nice day, actually. So if you're going to spend some time outside, tomorrow is the day to do it. Which is a nice surprise, because I looked earlier in the week and it said it was going to be raining all weekend. So that's a nice change.
I suppose so. But, John, of course, we're looking at Wales now on our screens, and the sea looks pretty ferocious there. This isn't just a sort of localised northern thing. Across the west coast, you were saying as well. How far south does this storm actually reach?
Well, it's sort of progressively less strong, the gusts further down the coast of Wales. But earlier on this morning, we saw gusts into the 90s miles an hour across the west coast of Wales. West coast of Wales is, shall we say, used to those sorts of wind strengths. Most winters, you get a 90-mile-an-hour gust across the west coast of Wales in the most vicious of storms. But really further south, through much of southern England, yes, it's been windy, but it's been sort of fairly standard fare. Hence, there was only a yellow warning for the more southern areas. Progressively further north, the warning has been amber. And then, as we've seen, the red warning, the rare red warning for Northern Ireland and Scotland. And if you're not in a red warning now, you probably won't be in a red warning, because the winds are peaking right now, as I say, across the heart of central Scotland. We've got a few more hours to go of those sorts of gusts, 90 to 100 miles an hour. So still the potential for a lot of damage and disruption, power outages, trees down, that sort of thing, before things gradually ease as we head into the evening and night. And yeah, tomorrow, complete transformation. It'll be tranquil, it'll be cold, and thankfully we can start the clear-up operation.
Well, there's the good news to end a pretty bad news segment. Although, John, I've got to say, you were saying that Aowyn is the E storm, and you think the name for an F storm. Frodo.
He ignored you.
I wish I'd never asked now.
Well, John Hammond, thank you so much for being with us and talking through the pretty spectacular scenes we're seeing across the west and the north.
Let us know if you're taking precautions. I've seen people taping their wheelie bins to the wall outside their house so they don't fly over and I don't know about your roof, whether you're worried about your roof or the like. I do think we also should talk at some point in the show today about this awful case that we just heard in the bulletins of this woman who's gone down for manslaughter, 10-year sentence, a house fire in her home. She'd gone out to the supermarket, left her 4 boys at home, and they all perished in a house fire.
Yeah, terrible.
It's just absolutely awful. Absolutely awful.
But we do want to ask you that if you're living in an area with this storm, if you've got any spectacular footage or pictures yourself, do send them in to us at GBNews on Twitter, now known as x.com, or you can use gbviews@gbnews.com, that old email address. Those are to send videos or pictures to. We'd love to see them, particularly if they're particularly dramatic.
Yes, but if they're not, you can also send them in as well. We've got lots more coming up on today's show, so stick with us. We are, of course, going to be returning to the Southport killer and that sentence that was handed down. What do you make of Nigel Farage's comments that the Director of Public Prosecutions at the CPS, the Crown Prosecution Service, should resign over the fact this incident, this horrific attack, wasn't labelled terror?
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
I'm really pleased to see this story. It's the news that bowel cancer screening, the age for that is going to be dropped from 60 to 50. And this is really, really important because bowel cancer is one of the biggest killers, and more people appear to be getting diagnosed with bowel cancer in their 50s. Not entirely clear why. And there was an inspirational woman called Deborah James who I actually met when I used to be the Shadow Health Secretary, and I remember meeting her when she had her cancer diagnosis and supporting her campaign, and she sadly passed away a couple of years ago, but it was a phenomenal campaign and I think did inspire the nation. And this is so important. So people in their 50s are going to be sent these kits in the post. And I suppose my plea is just do not ignore these kits because you can deal with cancer if you catch it early enough.
Yeah.
So
I mean, this is not the most pleasant thing to do, and a lot of us aren't used to it and talking about it and whatever, but it's essential, obviously, to do.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And the other reason I wanted to sort of flag this is, I mean, we can sometimes make ourselves sort of pretty miserable looking at the newspapers, but this is undoubtedly a good initiative that the government have done this, and that campaigners have persuaded the government to do this. So, look, I just want to plea to everybody watching, if you get one of these kits, use it.
And of course, I think it's really important within that to point out that this would not have helped Deborah, because Deborah was 40 when she died. And what's really important when you see stories like this is to pay attention to what your body is telling you. And if you have symptoms that are weird, it is important to go to your doctor and to talk about them and to take the tests.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
It's a good point. He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
OK, good afternoon, Britain. It's 1:23. Now, Axel Ridabakana, yes, he's been jailed for life with a minimum term in prison of 52 years.
Well, this monster's punishment is thought to be the longest handed to a killer of his age, 17 years old.
Father of one of the girls murdered was heard calling out "coward" as Ridabakana was removed from the court after shouting and screaming in the dock.
Well, those present, the family members and the victims, listened to emotional victim impact statements and finally the sentencing of the killer without him being present.
And now the lead detective probing the Southport attack has revealed he wanted the mass murder to be declared terrorism, but the Crown Prosecution Service said the killings didn't meet the legal requirement.
Well, let's speak to the former police officer Peter Williams now for more on this. Peter, there is a big debate over whether or not this is terrorism. Some people say clearly this was a terrorising event. It was a mass slaughter. It has all the hallmarks of terrorism. But on the other hand, there wasn't a clear ideological reason behind it that has yet been discovered.
Yeah, absolutely correct. I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, I think when we all reflect on it, and I think this will probably come out at the public inquiry, I think if it had been called or labelled a terrorist incident, I don't think anybody would really complain the other way, saying it shouldn't have been. I think it was a judgment call on behalf of the CPS. But having said that, I actually do think the CPS did get it right. In relation to definitions of terrorism, which is what this debate is about, there are a couple of hundred across the world. So there's differences between countries. And in the case of the United States, which has state law, there's actually differences within countries. So the definition of terrorism, and in the case of the UK, comes from the Terrorism Act 2000, which effectively replaced the Prevention of Terrorism Act at the time of which lapsed at the time of the Good Friday Agreement. This particular incident doesn't fit that criteria, but around the time of 9/11, when George Bush announced the war on terror, because there was a diversity of definitions, people were asking the question, just actually what are you declaring war on? And that prompted a comment from the British ambassador to the United Nations at the time, And he made the point, what looks and smells like terrorism probably is terrorism. And I think our viewers would probably be able to relate to that. But unfortunately, the prosecution have to deal beyond all reasonable doubt with to prove the elements necessary within the Terrorism Act 2000. And in their view, and that was agreed by the judge yesterday, although reading between the lines, I don't think he necessarily agreed with that assertion. Their view was that this wasn't to be a terrorist act. In fact, the prosecutor said yesterday during her outline, there's no evidence that he ascribed to any particular political or religious ideology. He wasn't fighting for a cause and wanted only to spread the greatest level of fear and outrage. And of course, that was the view of the CPS, who effectively, of course, overruled the police.
Yeah, and that is compelling. I just wonder, are you satisfied that we know enough about the motivation behind this awful attack? Because he did pick this particular dance class. He did pick to target little girls. And those are sometimes, just those two decisions there can often be associated with terrorism. We saw Ariana Grande, we've seen Taylor Swift concerts being targeted.
Absolutely, but what looks and smells like terrorism probably is, but can you prove it under the Terrorism Act? And the prosecution took the view they couldn't. Now, Keir Starmer, in his statements on Tuesday, made references to that, saying we need to return to this legal framework. Now, what you heard on Tuesday wasn't Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister. You heard from Keir Starmer, the lawyer. And his assertion in relation to that was absolutely right. And I think, this is my own view only, from the public inquiry, which unfortunately will take time, we will see a revision of the definition of terrorism that does capture these events. Now, if we just take this particular individual, as you said, following a search of his house, there was obviously this issue of the rice in, which could be associated. There's also the Al-Qaeda training manual. Now, why did he have that? That was the issue. But terrorist offences are notably difficult and take time. That's why the criminal law allows 2 weeks, 14 days prior to charge, where normally it is 24 hours. In the case of the severity of this, of course, it can be extended to 96 with permission from the court, which is what happened, although Merseyside police charged him before that. But the point I'm making is they're notoriously difficult to prove. This individual basically said nothing apart from some unsolicited comments when he was taken into custody, presumably at a police station in the Southport area. Now, the CPS, in making their decision, will have looked at the circumstances and what he said at that time. Now, at the end of the day, what a lot of people forget, we operate in an adversarial criminal justice system, which is summarised as being a search for the proof. We don't operate the inquisitorial continental system, which is summarised as a search for the truth. And of course, what Keir Starmer said at the lawyer, and I agree with him, was that we had to get those convictions. Because if we'd have said something that prejudiced the jury, the defence would have made
Peter, because a lot of lawyers have spoken to us. A lot of lawyers have spoken to us, and they've said, actually, yes, he needs to be careful. He would have needed to be careful, but there were ways in which he could have allowed us to have some more information about the suspect and more information about what was found in his home.
Well, that's true. I don't think that answers the point about terrorism, because take the Louisiana murderer that we saw just over New Year's. When they went to his home, they found Qurans everywhere. He was very clearly a signed-up member of an Islamist terror agenda. This guy, Axel Rudikabana's bedroom was full of, very odd sort of documents. I mean, some were from, well, there was the one manual from Al-Qaeda, but there was also books on Gaddafi, on the Rwandan genocide. He'd been looking up school shootings in America. I mean, it could be that this was a guy that had a lust for violence, and perhaps, gruesomely, the number of times he stabbed each girl shows that he was sort of taking pleasure out of doing that, perhaps more than the ideological ascribements that we would put on the traditional British view of terrorism. I mean, an Islamist terrorist wants to bring about a global caliphate. The IRA wanted to destroy Northern Ireland and unite. The suffragettes wanted to bring women the vote.
Yeah, different terrorists obviously have different ideologies, yes, and there's no obvious cause for this. Peter Williams, we're going to have to leave it there. I'm very sorry. Former police officer, but fantastic to get your insight into this all. Yes, well...
I think there's a lot more to learn, basically,
yeah,
is what
it does sound as though there is.
Out from that. But this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News, and there's plenty more to come. Indeed, British children are 50 times more likely to suffer from, quotes, gender distress than 10 years ago. More on that after this.
Tom, thank you. The top story. Storm Aowyn is sweeping across the UK, bringing record-breaking winds and severe weather conditions. 1 in 5 flights from airports in the UK and Ireland have been cancelled today. Millions of people have been urged to stay home. Forecasters have flagged a rare threat to life red weather warning. More than 240,000 homes and businesses are now without power in Northern Ireland. A wind speed of 114 miles per hour brought by the storm has been recorded in Ireland, the fastest since records began. 20,000 Scottish Power customers across the centre and south of the country are without electricity, and a red danger to life warning for wind has been extended in Scotland, where more than 35,000 properties have lost power, and local authorities have warned commuters to avoid travel at all costs. The Southport child killer will likely die behind bars after murdering 3 girls at a dance class, but his 52-year sentence has sparked calls for law changes. Axel Rudikabana received one of the highest minimum custody terms on record for the attack at that dance class in Southport in July last year, when he was 17 years old. Alice De Silva Aguirre, BB King and Elsie Stankham were killed, and harrowing details of the attack were heard at Liverpool Crown Court yesterday. Southport's Labour MP Patrick Hurley said the sentence was not severe enough, and he's asked the Attorney-General to review it as unduly lenient. Due to Rudikabana's age at the time of the attack, he cannot legally receive a whole-life order. The head of the UK's largest police force has welcomed a review of contempt of court laws and said it would be great if more information in cases could be shared at an earlier stage. Defence Secretary John Healey says Rudikabana did not get a whole-life sentence because international law prevented it. And a mother whose 4 young boys died in a fire after she left them home alone to go to a supermarket has been jailed for 10 years. Devika Rose had left her 2 sets of twins in the locked terrace house when the fatal blaze broke out on the evening of the 16th of December 2021. Jurors were told the 4 children died after a discarded cigarette or upturned tea light sparked a blaze at the family home. The 30-year-old, who suffered from mental health problems, was found guilty of 4 counts of manslaughter following trial. Rose and the children had been living in squalor before the tragedy. Those are the latest headlines for now. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. The Republic of Ireland recorded its strongest wind gust on record because of Storm Aowyn, and for Northern Ireland, the strongest winds since 1998. And those winds are now moving into Scotland, so winds continuing to pick up across the central belt with the risk of 80 to 90 mile per hour gusts, and in some of the most exposed spots, 100 mile per hour gusts for parts of Northern Ireland into central and southwest Scotland. during the afternoon. Now, as the afternoon progresses, the strongest sway the winds will push north, associated with the band of rain and hill snow for Scotland. Brighter skies elsewhere, and actually much less windy for England and Wales. There will be some cloud and some outbreaks of rain towards the far southeast. Otherwise, a largely more settled end to the day for England and Wales. Just a few showers about. But for central and northern Scotland, well, the winds will continue to increase into the evening as the storm shifts north. So we can expect gusts of 80, perhaps 90 mile per hour wind gusts before the day is out for the far north of Scotland. Northern Ireland, by this stage, the worst is over. England and Wales, as I say, it's going to be much less windy by the end of the day. Some showers moving through Wales and the southwest. That could lead to a few gusty winds in places, but overall the winds are easing overnight for England and Wales, as well as central and southern Scotland and Northern Ireland. The worst will be over by this stage. Showers and some snow falling out of those showers in the north because it's going to be a cold start to Saturday. Widespread frost. Some patches of ice around as well. Amber warning for northern Scotland expires Saturday morning, and so the winds by this stage are coming down, and the strongest winds, the gales, are largely confined to the far north of Scotland. Elsewhere, a bright enough day with lighter winds for England and Wales, further showers and blustery winds coming into Northern Ireland and western parts later, and then another low comes on Sunday, not quite as bad as Aowyn.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Russell Holding. The M74 in South Lanarkshire is closed northbound from junction 13 at Abington to 11 at Pownhill after a lorry overturned. The M2 in Antrim is closed in both directions because of a fallen tree. Westbound's closed from junction 5 at Temple Patrick to the M22. Eastbound's closed from the M22 to junction 7. In Gwynedd, the A55 is closed in both directions over the Britannia Bridge to and from the Isle of Anglesey because of strong winds. On the M1 in Derbyshire, it's down to a single lane northbound for emergency repairs just before the tib shelf services between junctions 28 and 29 near Mansfield. It's taking over half an hour in the queues. In Suffolk, the A14 is blocked westbound where a car caught fire just before junction 54 at Sproughton, with the queues from junction 55. The A12 Copdock interchange. And on the M25 in Kent, it's down to a single lane anti-clockwise after an accident between junctions 3 and 2 from the M20 to the A2 causing queues.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
OK, good afternoon, Britain. It's now 1:38. Now, a shock new report has found children in England are 50 times more likely to suffer from so-called gender distress compared to over a decade ago.
Well, NHS records show that in 2011, just 200 people under the age of 18 identified as transgender or struggled with gender dysphoria. But by 2021, it was up to 10,000.
OK, well, let's speak to psychotherapist and founder of GenSpect, Stella O'Malley, who joins us now. Stella, thank you very much. I mean, that is a huge increase. What do you put it down to?
I put it down to social contagion, I put it down to social media, and I put it down to an extraordinary politicisation of the trans identity, so that people who are lost and people who are vulnerable, and the children in this study have shown to have a disproportionately high level of maybe autism, mental health problems. People are lost and lonely. They look for solutions, and the idea that they can be a different person with a different identity is very alluring to a lost and lonely person, especially a young person who hates their body and is going through kind of an exploration of who they are. I can understand why these kids fall into the idea that maybe I'm trans, maybe I should be a boy, and I should have a different name, and I should be he, him. But I can't quite understand the clinicians who are seeing incontrovertible evidence that this rise is phenomenal. When you go from 200 to 10,000 cases in 10 years, we're looking at something extraordinary, and that's when the adults in the room need to exercise caution and be very careful with the treatment they give them.
Of course, this does fall into the sort of what mathematicians call the sort of fallacy of large degrees with small numbers.
Oh, come on.
If you go from 1 to 2, that's a 100% increase, right? We're talking about 10,000 people out of a children's population of 12.5 million. That's less than 0.1% of children. Shouldn't we sort of expect that perhaps that number would exist? I mean, we're talking about very, very small proportions.
Well, you have to look at the proportionate rise. And when the proportionate rise is 50 times higher in 10 years, you would have to accept that there is something causing the rise. And one would have to be open to exploring all the reasons for the rise. In the midst of that rise, between 2011 and 2021, social media arrived, high-speed Wi-Fi arrived, smartphones arrived. And so we have to plug that into the data. We would be irresponsible if we just said, oh, rises are going to happen, 50 times the rise among children on an extremely distressing condition. We just have to suck it up because rises happen. That's missing the point of research, because research suggests that when there's an extraordinary rise, we should look for all the reasons why. If there was an extraordinary rise in the number of people eating Mars bars, if there was 50 times more, I'd say, why? What's going on there? Let's research this. Let's figure it out. And if it's something as distressing as gender dysphoria, where people change their bodies, they impair their sexual functioning, they ruin their own fertility so that they can't have children in their adult lives, well, we really need to explore what is actually going on. Might there be a least invasive first treatment approach where maybe psychology, psychosocial interventions, other interventions might work a good deal better than changing their bodies for life?
Yeah, Stella, I'm particularly concerned about the sharp rise in the number of girls, in particular, far outweighing the number of cases in boys now. Because when you look at transgender adults, most tend to be male to female. But this rise in girls, and I've been a teenage girl, an adolescent girl, and I can completely understand why this is happening, or I think I can anyway. It does feel as though, similar to eating disorders, uncomfortable with your changing body, not wanting to have, the figure of a woman quite yet, not being there mentally and psychologically to cope with that. Add to that potentially mental health issues, availability of this on social media, potentially autism as well, and you can see how this happens.
Yeah, you're right. And when you look at the ability for the teenage girl to hate her body and to attack her own body, it's unlimited. You go from anorexia, let's say in the 70s and 80s, you've got bulimia in the 80s and 90s, self-harming in the 90s and the noughties, and then gender dysphoria arrives in the noughties and the teens. You could say that the ability of the teenage girl to hate her body and to look for ever more inventive ways to attack her own body. It's something that we need to look at, because social contagion is most common among teenage girls. They empathize with each other. They kind of co-ruminate with each other. They say, I've got that too, and I hate myself too. And they kind of get into it in a real sweet and lovely, big-natured way. But they end up, as a result, suffering from really, really devastating mental illnesses. And so this rise is particularly high among the teenage girls. And teenage girls are known to be impacted by social contagion. And the numbers on this particular condition, gender dysphoria, suggest that social contagion is happening. And throw in social media and you've got the extraordinary perfect storm that we have on our hands right now.
OK, well, Stella O'Malley, thank you very much indeed, psychotherapist and founder of GenSpec. Thank you very much for coming on the show.
I have to say, I was looking at that number of the 2011 number.
You're just trying to pretend it's not an issue just because it's not every child.
I was looking at the 2011 number, 192. That's not in one. That's not just one age. That is everyone under the age of 18 in the United Kingdom that had ever gone to see someone about gender dysphoria. Only 192 people out of 12.5 million. 192 out of 12.5 million.
What are you talking about?
That was the 2011 number.
Yeah, the 2011 number.
Now it's 10,000.
Yeah, it's increased massively.
Yeah, from an almost negligible base. So what I'm saying is that when you have a negligible base up to a rate of 0.01%, it looks like a huge rise, even though we're talking about functionally tiny numbers.
If the number were to increase at this rate
10,000
continuously, you could potentially have huge numbers. And I personally think that 10,000 is a rather large number. And to just dismiss it because it started off at a very small number, it doesn't really make sense. What are you exactly trying to say? What are you trying to argue?
What I'm saying is that the incidence of transgender people who are adults is actually a lot higher than this number, right?
Yes, so?
So if we're looking at people who are 16 and 17, or indeed younger, and we're adding all of these people up out of the 12.5 million people under the age of 18, and we only get 10,000 people, that is actually not a big surprise. What we should be looking at is if it continues to rise.
Yeah, but I'm thinking of the girls. I'm thinking of the girls suddenly overtaking the boys in terms of wanting to be a different gender. And I'm thinking, having been a girl of that age, I'm thinking about the number of girls who had eating disorders, the number of girls who hated their bodies, the number of girls who didn't want to grow a figure, the number of girls who self-harmed as well. And I'm thinking, I wonder if there's something about that social contagion. You wouldn't just have a rise for no reason,
Looking at the number for girls, I mean, it's a little over 5,000.
It's a huge number of going to the GP.
Across the entire country. Just a little over 5,000.
OK, not a problem. Not a problem.
Well, I'm saying it doesn't look like an epidemic,
Well,
does
I
it?
think it's a real big problem. Anyway, if you're in search of some winter sun, here is the forecast for some of the top European holiday destinations.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries. All sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Unsettled at times across western parts of Europe. This includes Portugal, Spain and parts of northwest France. We're likely to see some heavy rain, also some strong winds at times. Largely settled across Tenerife, but Madeira, parts of Portugal, Spain, northwestern France could see some showers merging into longer spells of rain at times and also some strong winds. As we head further east, largely settled across Rome and also parts of Greece, but a chance we could see some showers here as we head into next week with the best of the temperatures across Tenerife.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Well, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. I hope you can't see the biscuit that I half ate.
You've been scoffing biscuits.
Oh well.
You've been doing an Aowyn.
I think I got away. I think I got away with it. And then I went and ruined it by saying I've been eating a biscuit during that. Well, let's move on. After serving the country in the Falklands and Iraq, the 1st Battalion Grenadier Guards are returning to Buckingham Palace. Yes, they're going to be inspected to ensure they're ready to take up ceremonial public duties for His Majesty the King. That next.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Lately, it's getting much better. The people getting more educated in terms of overall well-being of the skin health rather than temporary aesthetic treatments. Because most of the treatments in aesthetic, it doesn't change the texture of the skin. It just gives like volumetric result or remove the wrinkles temporarily.
So what are the most popular treatments that people are after?
According to a statistic report, first is anti-wrinkle, then dermal filler, then energy-based device. Yeah. But lately, biostimulators also became very popular. And
what do you mean by biostimulators?
Biosimulator, any substance that can change the texture of the skin, or like it will lead to postpone the aging process, or proliferate more collagen, increase the elasticity of the skin, such as polynucleotide or exosome, or different vitamins and minerals in a form of mesotherapy considered as a biostimulator.
Turkey's a particularly popular destination because the costs are so much lower. There have also been a lot of horror stories about what can happen when things go wrong, even people dying from post-surgery complications. What would you advise people?
Choose as a practitioner or surgeon very carefully and never prioritize price over quality. This is your face after all, your body after all. And mistakes can be reversible. It can be irreversible, and sometimes it's not like a booking restaurant or hotel. It's a sensitive matter that can affect their confidence and skin and body for life. Yeah. So they need to choose very wisely. They need to search what kind of methodology that particular surgeon they perform the treatments. Are they using any safety tools?
GB News, the People's Channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It is now 10 to 2, and the Grenadier Guards are set to return to Buckingham Palace after 5 years on operational duty.
Yes, members of the regiment were deployed around the world, including to Iraq, the wider Middle East and the Falklands.
Well, on Thursday, the 1st Battalion Grenadier Guards were inspected to ensure they were ready to take up ceremonial public duties for His Majesty the King. Our royal correspondent Cameron Walker has the story.
The last time the 1st Battalion Grenadier Guards were protecting royal palaces, Queen Elizabeth II was still on the throne. Since 2020, they've been deployed to Iraq, the wider Middle East, and the Falkland Islands.
After 5 years in operational combat roles, these battle-hardened soldiers must now turn their skills to ceremonial perfection on behalf of the nation and the King, promoting Britain at its best.
And it's nothing short of perfection that's expected from the King and his Brigade Major of the Household Division. Lieutenant Colonel Charles Foynet is scrutinising every aspect of the Guardsmen's performance at their fit-for-role inspection at Lille Barracks in Aldershot. So what's his verdict?
Everything that is within the power of the soldiers has been done to an extremely high standard. The things we tend to be commenting on are things like fit of uniforms, where perhaps some tailoring adjustment is required, or in one or two cases where bearskins are perhaps a little bit beyond their design life and are going a funny colour or could fit better. So it's really about providing the appropriate support to make sure that the soldiers and indeed the battalion get the support they require to perform to the highest standard.
Assuming the Brigade Major thinks they're fit for duty, the Grenadier Guards will take up positions at Buckingham Palace, Windsor Castle, the Tower of London and St James's Palace on Monday. As well as ceremonial guard changes, they'll help the King welcome visiting world leaders during high-profile state visits. In private, it's understood His Majesty often dines with his guardsmen, a particularly close bond he's developed as company commander of the King's Company. Captain Robin Mackworth-Young of the Grenadier Guards explains the relationship.
It's a huge privilege to have His Majesty as our Commander-in-Chief, and I know that he takes his responsibilities to not only us, but all of his regiments in the British Army very seriously. We feel a particular connection to the royal family, having been personally formed by King Charles II in exile in 1656, and that close relationship between the Grenadier Guards and the wider Household Division has remained extant for those 400 and something years.
This summer, the Grenadier Guards are expected to take part in the 80th anniversary commemorations for the end of the Second World War, supporting their Colonel, the Queen, and their Commander-in-Chief, the King. Cameron Walker, GB News, Aldershot.
Thank you very much, Cameron. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Here is your weather.
A chilly start will give way to a lovely, warm afternoon. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. The Republic of Ireland recorded its strongest wind gust on record because of Storm Aowyn, and for Northern Ireland, the strongest winds since 1998. And those winds are now moving into Scotland, so winds continuing to pick up across the central belt with the risk of 80 to 90 mile-per-hour gusts, and in some of the most exposed spots, 100-mile-per-hour gusts for parts of Northern Ireland into central and southwest Scotland during the afternoon. Now, as the afternoon progresses, the strongest sway the winds will push north, associated with the band of rain and hill snow for Scotland. Brighter skies elsewhere, and actually much less windy for England and Wales. There will be some cloud and some outbreaks of rain towards the far southeast. Otherwise, a largely more settled end to the day for England and Wales. Just a few showers about. But for central and northern Scotland, well, the winds will continue to increase into the evening as the storm shifts north. So we can expect gusts of 80, perhaps 90-mile-per-hour wind gusts before the day is out for the far north of Scotland. Northern Ireland, by this stage, the worst is over. England and Wales, as I say, it's going to be much less windy by the end of the day. Some showers moving through Wales and the southwest. That could lead to a few gusty winds in places, but overall the winds are easing overnight for England and Wales, as well as central and southern Scotland and Northern Ireland. The worst will be over by this stage. Showers and some snow falling out of those showers in the north because it's going to be a cold start to Saturday. Widespread frost, some patches of ice around as well. Amber warning for northern Scotland expires Saturday morning, and so the winds by this stage are coming down, and the strongest winds, the gales, are largely confined to the far north of Scotland. Elsewhere, a bright enough day with lighter winds for England and Wales, further showers and blustery winds coming into Northern Ireland and western parts later, and then another low comes on Sunday, not quite as bad as Aowyn.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
There's just 2 weeks left to grab your chance to win our biggest cash prize so far. £50,000 in tax-free cash. How would you react if you won?
Oh my God.
That's a big surprise.
Amazing, just the best feeling ever.
I'm in shock. That is absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
no,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2 o'clock on Friday, the 24th of January. I'm Tom Harwood.
And I'm Emily Carver.
It's been described as the worst storm in the century. Storm Aowyn batters Britain, with hurricane-force winds expected to reach up to 100 miles per hour in some parts of the country. Our reporters are live.
Oh my goodness, Tom.
Northern Ireland has felt the brunt of Storm Aowyn.
its structural damage can now be seen, and they begin to count the cost as winds die down.
OK, and a life behind bars for Southport killer Axel Rudabakana. He will likely die in prison after he received a 52-year sentence for the murder of 3 little girls. But are you satisfied that we know enough about his motivation?
And the mother of 4 young boys have been jailed for 10 years after her children were killed in a fire. This after she left them home alone. Now, I've been trying to pronounce this storm all day, and I think I might just sort of give up and start calling it Storm Aowyn.
OK, you could do that. It might annoy people, but you can.
I just sort of
never stopped you, did it?
We like farmers here at GB News, so I thought Old MacDonald might have a bit of more of a resonance to it than
it is Aowyn.
Aowyn.
And
Aowyn.
We've received a lot of messages of Aowyn from the Lord of the Rings. The strongest woman in the realm.
It's just not a sound I often make. Aowyn.
Well, yeah, well, don't know what to do about that for you.
No.
You just have to practice.
I guess so.
Practice makes perfect.
No,
can you tell it's Friday?
Can you? I mean, we've reached the silly stage of the show, but we should really pull it back because there are serious topics to talk about too. There is this looming question over what was the real motivation of Axel Rudabakana, the Southport killer. Was it as simple as he had a lust for violence, or was there something deeper?
Yeah, why did he specifically target those girls, that dance class? Was it just that he saw the advert and thought, oh, they'll be vulnerable? Or was there something deeper? Was it the fact they were girls? Let us know your thoughts, gbnews.com/your say. But let's get to the headlines with Tatiana.
Emily, Tom, thank you very much. The top story, Storm Aowyn is sweeping across the UK, bringing record-breaking winds and severe weather conditions with it. 1 in 5 flights from airports in the UK and Ireland have been cancelled today. Millions of people have been urged to stay home. Forecasters have flagged a rare threat to life red weather warning. Over 4 million people across Northern Ireland and Scotland received emergency alerts from the Met Office last night with guidance on how to stay safe. More than 240,000 homes and businesses are now without power in Northern Ireland. A wind speed of up to 114 miles per hour brought by that storm has been recorded in Northern Ireland, the fastest since records began. 20,000 Scottish power customers across the centre and south of the country are without electricity, and a red danger to life warning for wind has been extended in Scotland, where more than 35,000 properties have lost power. Local authorities are warning commuters to avoid travel at all costs. The Southport child killer will likely die behind bars after murdering 3 little girls at a dance class, but his 52-year sentence has sparked calls for law changes. Axel Rudabakana received one of the highest minimum custody terms on record for the attack at the dance class in Southport in July last year when he was 17 years old. Alice De Silva Aguirre, B.B. King and Elsie Stankham were killed, and harrowing details of the attack were heard at Liverpool Crown Court yesterday. However, Southport's Labour MP Patrick Hurley said that sentence was not severe enough, and he asked the Attorney-General to review it as unduly lenient. Due to Rudabakana's age at the time of the attack, he cannot legally receive a whole life order. The head of the UK's largest police force has welcomed a review of contempt of court laws and said it would be great if more information in cases could be shared at an earlier stage. Defence Secretary John Healey told GB News Axel Rudabakana did not get a whole life sentence because international law prevented it.
The technicality of the whole life sentences, I think it's important to know that the last government did reduce it to 18 in line with international law after the Manchester Arena bombings, and that still stands. There are a range of other aspects of law, of agencies who have failed in this case to step in. They knew about this man's extreme violence, but they failed to take any steps that might have prevented it. And there may be changes also in the programmes that are designed to deal with this sort of extremism. That's what the inquiry now, the court case has finished, which was launched this week, will do.
Wigan County Council has voted for a national inquiry into the grooming gang scandal, breaking with the Labour government's position. The local authority, which is Labour-led, unanimously voted through a motion requesting that a full national inquiry is undertaken. The motion said the abuse had destroyed the lives of tens of thousands of teenage girls, adding that an inquiry would provide justice for the young girls who've suffered and identify preventative measures moving forward. In other news, a mother whose 4 young boys died in a fire after she left them home alone to go to a supermarket has been jailed for 10 years. Devika Rose had left her 2 sets of twins in the locked terrace house when the fatal blaze broke out on the evening of the 16th of December 2021. Jurors were told today the 4 children died after a discarded cigarette or upturned tea light sparked a blaze at the family home in South London. The 30-year-old, who suffered from mental health problems, was found guilty of 4 counts of manslaughter following trial. Rose and the 4 children had been living in squalor before the tragedy. The Court of Appeal has ruled that the 3 judges who oversaw family court proceedings related to the care of Sarah Sharif can be named next week. A judge had earlier ruled they couldn't be named due to a real risk of harm to them from a virtual lynch mob. The media were previously allowed to report that Surrey County Council had concerns about Sarah's father, Irfan Sharif, as early as 2010, and that Sarah was involved in 3 sets of family court proceedings before she was murdered by Sharif and her stepmother, Bainash Batul, at their home in Surrey. Sharif and Batul were jailed for life for the 10-year-old's murder in December, with minimum terms of 40 years and 33 years. In other news, Hamas is expected to hand over to Israel the names of 4 hostages to be released tomorrow under the Gaza ceasefire deal. It's thought they'll be soldiers and civilians, all female. The terror group says it'll be in exchange for 180 Palestinian prisoners and detainees who are held by Israel. It'll be the second exchange since the ceasefire came into effect last Sunday. 3 hostages and 19 prisoners were released in the first swap. And finally, 2 giant pandas have made their public debut at the Smithsonian's National Zoo in Washington, D.C. Well, a zoo volunteer says Bao Li, a male whose name translates to active and vital power, and King Bao, a female whose name means green and treasure, have already won the hearts of their staff and volunteers there. The pandas, both 3 years old, make their much-welcomed return after a 15-month absence. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. More in half an hour.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's now 8 minutes past 2, and people in the UK are being urged to stay indoors and avoid travel at all costs in some areas as Stormy Aowyn rolls into town.
Forecasters are issuing a rare threat to life, a red weather warning across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Speeds of the wind are hitting over 100 miles per hour.
Well, joining us now is our Northern Ireland reporter, Doogie Beattie. And Doogie, Northern Ireland took the brunt of it overnight.
Well, it did. The whole island of Ireland actually took the brunt of it. The storm arrived in Cork this morning about 2 o'clock, made its way up the coast. Galway had speeds of 114 miles an hour wind, and it did severe damage, bringing down trees, electricity power lines. It reached Northern Ireland round about 6 o'clock this morning. I mean, we were standing at the seafront and could hardly stand up. And these gusts were extremely damaging. Schools have been off today. All major supermarkets are closed. I mean, it reminds me of COVID. But now that the wind is dying down, it still is very, very fierce, but it's not as bad as it was. We can start to count the cost, and you'll see behind me here, this is one of Northern Ireland's newest leisure centres. This is the Bangor Aquatic Centre. Millions and millions of pounds, and you can see the damage on the roof to that. Ratepayers will have to pay for that, and it goes right over to the back end of this complex, and quite basically it will have to be re-roofed at some stage of the game. And of course, all the council workers aren't out today. You can see the car park here is empty, so they'll be returning to that tomorrow. We've also got massive power outages across Northern Ireland and problems with trees coming down and cutting off electricity. So not a good day for Northern Ireland. but we've lived with it before. It's the type of weather we're used to. In fact, this time last year, we were reporting on storms that really hit the North Antrim coast. But these storms left here, the fierce part of these storms left here about 2.5 hours ago and made land in Scotland. And we believe in and around Troon in that area, there is the same sort of problems coming.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Doogie Beattie. Let's hope the clear-up operation is not too arduous. And, of course, we'll be over in Scotland looking at that storm a little bit later.
Yeah, I hope Tony Maguire's all right. It looked pretty precarious, his position a little earlier. Those winds, Scotland is taking a battering, that's for sure. Shall we speak to travel correspondent from The Independent, our favourite Simon Calder? Simon, reading that 1 in 5 flights have been cancelled in and out of the United Kingdom, how much other disruption has there been?
Well, I'm here at King's Cross Station in London, which is relatively calm. However, you're not going to be able to travel north of Newcastle. There's one train an hour running as far as the Tyne, and you're actually advised not to try to travel north of York. On the West Coast Main Line, the answer is don't go north of Preston. We have got massive problems in England due to fallen trees between Stafford and Wolverhampton. There's another one down between Derby and Sheffield with cancellations on the line to and from London. And wherever you're heading, it seems that there's potential disruption on the railways. And that's it before you even get to Scotland and Northern Ireland. Both countries, all trains have been cancelled today. And if I can talk about the flights, over 1,000 flights cancelled in the UK and in Ireland. Most of them actually to, from or within Scotland, many hundreds there, particularly from Edinburgh and Glasgow, and also an awful lot in Dublin. And frankly, there are going to be hundreds of thousands of people waking up tomorrow morning where they didn't intend or want to be.
Oh, it's tough, isn't it? Looking just across the country, it's not just up in Scotland. We're looking at live pictures from Wales now as well, affecting the air, affecting the trains. What about the roads?
Yeah, they've been pretty awful. We had a nasty event on the A19. A lorry turned over. That's caused a lot of problems in County Durham. Elsewhere, the warning has actually been, and it sounds as though quite a lot of people have respected it, in red weather warning areas. Do not drive unless absolutely essential. And actually, that's one reason we've had a lot of problems at airports, because staff are not able to get there safely. And so they've been staying at home. Things are going to be restarting, but there's, well, for instance, a lot of diversions around. Passengers from Krakow on Ryanair kept trying to get into Glasgow this morning, ended up in Manchester. Some passengers from Bratislava trying to get to Edinburgh. Well, they're in London Stansted. And there was actually a flight from Stansted to Edinburgh, took off, flew around. It looked at one point as though it was diverting to Cologne in Germany, but it actually went back to its starting position. Things will get slightly easier. And actually, there's a lot of people sitting around watching GB News who are thinking, well, it's all very well, good programme, but we'd rather be where we're supposed to be, whether that's in Rome or in Egypt. And what's happened there is that actually, particularly Jet2, have delayed lots of flights to make sure that people will get to their destination eventually. But you could be looking at anything up to a 16-hour delay on a Jet2 flight from Edinburgh to Rome. You are going to get there, but it won't be in time for a very nice Roman lunch. It will be in the early hours of Saturday morning.
That sounds nice. Little Roman lunch.
Yeah, although I suppose it would be a Roman breakfast by the time that everything went there. Simon Calder, live from King's Cross Station in London. Appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us.
This is going to really scupper people's plans.
Yeah.
So frustrating when you get to the train station and they say, Oh, no, you can only go up to Newcastle. Oh, no, you can only go to York. And you're trying to get to Aberdeen or wherever.
Although I suppose it makes a nice change for some of these budget airlines. Normally, if you're flying from somewhere in Eastern Europe to London, you might end up in the north or in the Midlands, right? You're flying to, I don't know, London, Manchester or London, Berwick-upon-Tweed. You know, you get these ridiculous sort of further away things. For once, people trying to fly into Scotland are actually going down to London. So, I mean, it's all topsy-turvy world.
Right, well, we're going to get some reaction to the breaking news that we received about an hour or so ago, that the mother of 4 young boys has been jailed for 10 years after her children were killed in a house fire.
Well, here's what happened. 30-year-old Davika Rose had gone to the supermarket, leaving her two sets of twins, locked in her home. But that's when a blaze broke out.
Yes, truly shocking. The children's step-grandmother, Kerry Hoth, spoke outside the Old Bailey.
Today marks the end of a 3-year ordeal. Bryson, Kyson, Leighton and Logan Hoth were cruelly taken from us in a senseless act of negligence by their mother, Davika Rose. This regard she showed towards our boys has been echoed throughout this whole trial, and our family have had to endure 3 years of lies, delays and false narratives. This time has been a nightmare, and the toll it's taken on our family cannot be overstated. We've heard speculation that the fire was caused by lights on the Christmas tree, false claims that the boys were left with a babysitter. We thank the jury for seeing past that and delivering us a true verdict. Bryson, Kyson, Leighton and Logan were left alone by their mother, Davika Rose, and she has been found to be responsible for their deaths. Bryson, Kyson, Leighton and Logan were beautiful, loving children who did not deserve this.
Well, joining us now is the former head of counter-terrorism at City of London Police, Kevin Hurley. Kevin, this is a tragic case in so many ways, but instinctively I feel like I can really see both sides here.
Well, perhaps, but let me tell you what I see here. I see there's a common thread this week of 3 shocking events, all very closely linked in terms of what's happened. The Southport murders, this particular incident, and the Sarah Sharif case, which was mentioned, which is a complete failure by social services principally to grasp the nettle and intervene early and decisively, and to a lesser extent, a failure by police officers and educators, because this woman was known to social services. There'd been 2 visits by a social worker in the months preceding this incident. In the second one, she reported to her bosses, "Bad smell, I'm very concerned," yet the case was closed. There's something that's gone very wrong, and I think probably austerity has played a part in it, in the way in which social services are now responding to areas where common sense tells you something's very wrong and we've got to do something.
I mean, Kevin,
it's also true for police officers as well getting involved in some of this stuff. People have become so compartmentalised and more concerned about filling in the form and ticking the boxes. They've done X, Y and Z, instead of saying, this sounds wrong, it is wrong, it smells wrong, we got to do something. We got to talk to the police, or we got to talk to the social services. This is absolutely the common thread in all 3 of these dreadful cases where young children have died. And where's the responsibility lie? Well, actually, it's with government, because they cut both those sets of social services. They've brought in cultures of fear. The organisations have suppressed the ability of professional people to use their common sense, and they're now too scared to act unless they make the wrong decision.
So what are you saying that essentially that essentially these children should have been taken away from this mother a long time ago? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm not actually saying that, but probably yes. But what I am saying is, we knew full well, or Sutton Social Services had had a couple of reports by social workers, one expressing her concerns about what was going on. They should have forced entry to that, supported by police, and had a really good look and satisfied themselves that these 4 small children were not left in the hands of an irresponsible person with some forms of mental disorder, but someone who, frankly, was not taking care of them properly.
It was beautiful,
it's simple. Of course, it's in all those 3 cases. If it smells wrong, if it looks wrong, if it tastes wrong, it probably is wrong. So do something and don't let the stones lay as they are and just say, I filled in my boxes. It's what we've got to in the public sector now. Literally, as a result of incidents like this, we get reactions where we let's do something, let's make sure this check gets done or that check gets done. Well, what it actually means is people have to fill forms in. They don't actually say, go out there and use your common sense. You know, a classic example, when a missing person report is made to police over the years, it used to come in and you would essentially look at it and say, is this a child who's run away from a children's home who's likely to come back later tonight? Is this someone who's staying out with their boyfriend? Or does this sound like an abduction? Well, what the police have done, they brought in a system called a missing persons form, or on the computer these days, where you scored multiple factors. And if it came up with it's a low risk, they did very little. Medium risk, a bit more. And high risk, they look a bit harder.
And it doesn't use any of the old-fashioned common sense human instincts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was a cop-out of common sense.
Yeah.
And that's happened with social... They put risk registers and all this in. It's an issue of training people, getting them experience, common sense, and then good quality leadership and supervisors saying, why aren't you going back? Well, I'm a bit concerned. Well, we'll take the police and go back this time.
Well, Kevin Hurley, I think you speak a lot of sense there. Thanks indeed for joining us, former head of counter-terrorism at City of London Police.
I mean, it's just incredibly awful story. A mentally unwell mother, clearly very negligent. Apparently the home was a complete state, excrement around the place. She left candles on, went out to the shop, and they perished in a fire.
Yeah, that does sound a lot more like her fault.
I mean...
Because reading the headline, you think,
but they say
what a
it's
terrible...
manslaughter rather than murder.
Yeah. But reading the headline, you think, what a terrible accident. I mean, maybe I'd make a terrible parent, but I would think just nip out to the shop, leave the kid there 5 minutes, hope everything's fine. I'm sure people do that. I'm sure people do that.
Well, I think it was during the pandemic as well. So, you know, it was at that time where you were only allowed one trip out, and this was a second trip, apparently. Not that that matters, really, but just a most awful story. And those beautiful little boys.
Yeah, tragedy.
Sorry to bring you another awful story, but it's happened.
Well, this is allegedly Good Afternoon Britain on GB News, and there's plenty more coming up on the programme. A life behind bars for the Southport killer. Yes, Axel Rudakabana will die in prison after he receives a 52-year sentence for the murder of those 3 little girls. But are you satisfied that you know enough, that we all know enough about this man's motivation?
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Newly released MI5 files reveal that Queen Elizabeth II was kept in the dark over the treachery of a senior courtier.
Yeah, for almost a decade. This is Sir Anthony Blunt, who played a double life, passing intelligence, the KGB, during World War II as a senior MI5 officer. But, remarkably, he was allowed to keep his position amid fears of a major scandal if the truth came out.
Well, now those files have been released by the National Archives, which includes the Queen's response to finding out a trusted member like Anthony Blunt was really a traitor.
Well, joining us now in the studio is GB News royal correspondent Cameron Walker. Good to see you this morning, Cameron. This is astonishing.
Absolutely, and this wasn't a little spy. This was Anthony Blunt was a full-blown spy. He passed to the Soviets the D-Day deception plans, but during the Second World War, he was working for MI5, but a double agent for the KGB as well.
The wrong plans.
He passed on the plans.
The wrong ones.
The wrong one in 1944. Yeah. Exactly. But he then got a job inside Buckingham Palace as one of the Queen's most trusted aides and courtiers, the surveyor of her art, essentially like kind of an art advisor for her late Majesty. There was always suspicions about Anthony Blunt way back in the early 50s because he was part of this notorious Cambridge spy ring, a group of 5 boys recruited at Cambridge. 2 of these people fled to Moscow in 1951. Anthony stayed behind in London and subsequently got a job inside inside Buckingham Palace, and it wasn't until 1964 that he confessed to his treachery. The reason he confessed was because he was granted immunity.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 26 minutes past 2. Now, the lead detective probing the Southport attack has revealed he wants the mass murder to be declared terrorism. But the Crown Prosecution Service, or indeed Crown Prosecution Service, said the killings didn't meet those legal requirements.
OK, well, let's now speak with Home Affairs editor at The Times, Matt Dathan, who's been covering this story. Matt, there's still lots of questions that people feel perhaps haven't been answered, particularly with relation to our politicians and our government. Just about the question of who knew what and when. We hear that Merseyside police seem to be saying that they did want to reveal some of the details around the suspect at the time and around what perhaps had been found in his home. But it was the CPS that said, no, you can't. I mean, do you have any more detail on that?
Yes, that's right. So the CPS has been sort of scapegoated, I guess, by the Merseyside police and the government in the last few days when they've been asked why were you not able to disclose the fact that the police found this study of a training manual, an Al-Qaeda training manual on his device, as well as the production of ricin. They've said the CPS were strongly advised us not to because it would jeopardise the trial when it came to it. And Yvette Cooper this week actually said that she too, as well as the detective, was keen to disclose more information about the terror-related offence that they were investigating. But as we know, it took them exactly 3 months from the attack to when they announced that he was being charged with this terror-related offence and the ricin. And it does beg the question, do we need the authorities to tell us more information about ongoing investigations when it's a matter of such importance?
I suppose we all know that an inquiry is going to be launched into the circumstances surrounding Axel Rudicabarna's brushes with authorities over the course of the last 5 or so years. But I suppose a question also for that inquiry, will it also look at what happened after the arrest of Axel Rudicabarna, after he was charged with a number of charges and then the later charges many months further down the line? Do you have any understanding as to whether or not this inquiry will look at, frankly, how the authorities responded to the tragedy in Southport, as well as the months and years preceding it?
Yeah, that's a really crucial question, Tom, and one that myself and other journalists and also opposition MPs have been trying to find out. It's very clear that the inquiry will cover the more than 15 missed opportunities, etc., to stop him from the age of 13 onwards, for example. What we don't know, and what the Home Office is not saying so far, is whether it will cover the period after the attack and the response after the attack. And just to explain why that is crucial, that is a crucial question of whether it does include the response, is because if it's a public inquiry, then it will have the power to compel witnesses to give evidence, but also it will compel them to do so under oath. There are lots of suggestions out there that we need clearing up. The government, the Home Secretary, has said that she will give a complete account of who knew what and when in government. But if that's simply a statement in the House of Commons, the likes of Chris Philp, the Shadow Home Secretary, is saying that's not going to be good enough because it will not go far enough in terms of looking at the detail, but also forcing people to come under oath to say what they knew and when, and to explain those decisions as well, because the CPS won't come to Parliament is in the House of Commons. They will probably do an inquiry in the Home Affairs Committee, but they won't be in that statement, for example, in the House of Commons. So it is quite crucial whether the question of whether it will cover the events since July 29th.
Yeah, because, Matt, I mean, to be frank, there are a lot of people in this country who think that there has been a cover-up, that the government chose not to tell us this information. Yes, Keir Starmer has said that he was very concerned about contempt of court, didn't want to prejudice a trial, but then we speak to other legal experts who say, well, hang on, yes, he needed to be careful, but he could have given more information. We then hear of terror-related charges down the line. Why weren't they mentioned sooner? It's going to be difficult sort of investigating that area, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And what was quite interesting was Nick Timothy, who's now a Conservative MP. He was Chief of Staff to Theresa May at the Home Office, but also in Number 10. And he was saying that when they were in power, and there were terror attacks, for example, the Parsons bomb attacker, they were able to disclose much more information about the attack and the investigation without the risk of prejudicing a free trial. But the argument that Keir Starmer and those in the Labour government are making is that because social media has become such a primary source of where people get their information from and is whipping up so many accounts of misinformation, they're saying that it's more paramount than ever before that the information disclosed is correct all along the way. I think it does beg the question in the future whether the police could be a bit more transparent. And obviously, we're now hearing that they wanted to be a bit more transparent, but the CPS held them back, according to them.
Well, let's hope that inquiry does look at the events after the tragic stabbing as well as beforehand. But for now, Matt Dathan, thanks so much for joining us here on GB News and explaining where we are precisely with it. Because I think to some extent it seems that the government may not have actually decided the full scope of this inquiry.
Yeah, these public inquiries need to ask the right questions, don't they? I mean, we did a poll a few days ago, didn't we, about how much do you trust a potential inquiry? Not much trust from a lot of you, I think it's fair to say. Well, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Lots more coming up on today's show. Yes, Rachel Reeves, have you noticed? She's scaling back on yet another policy, this time her tough stance on non-dom tax rules. This as there's a fear that there are many, many millionaires leaving the country. Now, don't you remember, we were told that non-doms would pay for everything? Perhaps not.
Emily, thank you. The top stories. Storm Aowyn is sweeping across the UK, bringing record-breaking winds and severe weather conditions. 1 in 5 flights from airports in the UK and Ireland have been cancelled today. Millions of people have also been urged to stay home. Forecasters have flagged a rare threat-to-life red weather warning. Over 4 million people across Northern Ireland and Scotland received emergency alerts from the Met Office last night with guidance on how to stay safe. More than 240,000 homes and businesses are now without power in Northern Ireland. A red danger-to-life warning for wind has been extended in Scotland, where more than 35,000 properties have also lost power. Local authorities are urging commuters to avoid travel at all costs. The Southport child killer will likely die behind bars after murdering 3 little girls at a dance class, but his 52-year sentence has sparked calls for law changes. Axel Rudakabana received one of the highest minimum custody terms on record for the attack in Southport in July last year when he was 17. Alice De Silva Aguirre, BB King and Elsie Stankham were all killed, and harrowing details of the attack were heard in court yesterday. Southport's Labour MP Patrick Hurley said the sentence was not severe enough, and he asked the Attorney-General to review it as unduly lenient. Due to Rudakabana's age at the time of the attack, he cannot legally receive a whole life order. And a mother whose 4 young boys died in a fire after she left them home alone to go to a supermarket has been jailed for 10 years. Devika Rose had left her 2 sets of twins in the locked terrace house when the fatal blaze broke out on the evening of the 16th of December in 2021. Jurors were told today the 4 children died after a discarded cigarette or upturned tea light sparked a blaze at the family home in South London. The 30-year-old, who suffered from mental health problems, was found guilty of 4 counts of manslaughter following trial. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. Sophia Hill has your next update.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. The Republic of Ireland recorded its strongest wind gust on record because of Storm Aowyn, and for Northern Ireland, the strongest winds since 1998. And those winds are now moving into Scotland, so winds continuing to pick up across the central belt with the risk of 80 to 90 mile per hour gusts, and in some of the most exposed spots, 100 mile per hour gusts for parts of Northern Ireland into central and southwest Scotland during the afternoon. Now, as the afternoon progresses, the strongest sway the winds will push north, associated with the band of rain and hill snow for Scotland. Brighter skies elsewhere, and actually much less windy for England and Wales. There will be some cloud and some outbreaks of rain towards the far southeast. Otherwise, a largely more settled end to the day for England and Wales. Just a few showers about, but for central and northern Scotland, well, the winds will continue to increase into the evening as the storm shifts north. So we can expect gusts of 80, perhaps 90 mile per hour wind gusts before the day is out for the far north of Scotland. Northern Ireland, by this stage, the worst is over. England and Wales, as I say, it's going to be much less windy by the end of the day. Some showers moving through Wales and the southwest. That could lead to a few gusty winds in places, but overall the winds are easing overnight for England and Wales, as well as central and southern Scotland and Northern Ireland. The worst will be over by this stage. Showers and some snow falling out of those showers in the north because it's going to be a cold start to Saturday. Widespread frost, some patches of ice around as well. Amber warning for northern Scotland expires Saturday morning, and so the winds by this stage are coming down, and the strongest winds, the gales, are largely confined to the far north of Scotland. Elsewhere, a bright enough day with lighter winds for England and Wales, further showers and blustery winds coming into Northern Ireland and western parts later, and then another low comes on Sunday, not quite as bad as Aowyn.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Russell Holding. The M74 in South Lanarkshire is closed northbound from junction 13 at Abington to 11 at Ponyhill after a lorry overturned. The M2 in Antrim's closed eastbound from the M22 to junction 7 because of a number of fallen trees. In Gwynedd, the A55 is closed each way over the Britannia Bridge to and from the Isle of Anglesey because of strong winds. The M48 Severn Bridge is closed each way between England and Wales because of strong winds. Diversions are via the M4. On the M1 in Derbyshire, there are 2 lanes closed northbound for emergency repairs between junctions 28 at Mansfield and the Tibshelf services with queues from junction 27. In Suffolk, the A14 is closed westbound just before junction 54 near Ipswich after a car caught fire with queues from junction 55. And on the M25 in Kent, 3 out of 4 lanes are closed anti-clockwise after an accident between junctions 3 and 2 from the M20 to the A2 with queues from junction 4.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 38 minutes past 2. Now, the Chancellor is scaling back her tough stance on non-dom rules after fears of a millionaire exodus.
Who could have seen that coming, eh? Well, the Chancellor has hinted at changes to attract global talent and business leaders, saying Britain must stay competitive. Problem is, a lot of them left already.
Well, we've had quite a few MPs flip-flop over the subject, but this is crucial. During the general election campaign, the Labour Party put forward changes to the non-dom rules, abolition of the non-dom status, closure of the so-called non-dom loophole as a panacea of funding for just about everything.
We will not have the big loopholes in the change on the non-dom taxation policy the government have had. You can't put your foreign assets into trust under Labour, and therefore there's more revenue.
Paid for by cracking down on tax avoiders and the non-dom tax status.
So what's Labour's solution? We would introduce a proper tax on the very super wealthy non-doms, and we would use the proceeds from that to fund extra appointments.
tightening up the rules around non-DOMs, cracking down on tax avoidance to fund those 40,000 additional appointments every single week in our NHS.
Paid for by cracking down on tax avoidance and non-DOMs.
The only tax changes that we're setting out at this election are the tax loophole changes that we have already set out on private schools, on private equity, on non-DOMs.
We'll pay for that by getting rid of the non-DOM status completely. That's the special tax status for the super rich.
We pay for that by cancelling this ridiculous loophole for non-DOMs so that they pay so much less tax than everybody else. We need government to get a grip.
Did you get that?
You've got to laugh.
They're going to pay for it all by cancelling the non-DOM loophole. Except they're not cancelling it, are they? Let's speak to our political editor, Chris Hope. What on earth's going on? The Chancellor's been talking a lot about this in Davos.
Yes, in Davos, not in Westminster, of course. Hello, Tom. Hi, Emily. That's right. This non-DOM reform is due to come in shortly, raising £2.7 billion a year. There's been concerns about the impact on very rich people who do pay this charge and don't pay other taxes in the UK. Figures recently show that we lost 10,800 millionaires last year, double the figure in 2023, one leaving every 45 minutes since Labour came to power. Each one would have been paying £400,000 of income tax. It's equivalent of maybe, look a different way, 530,000 average taxpayers leaving the UK last year. So a concern, rich people don't trust Labour, it seems. What's the result? It looks like there's some tweaking to these non-DOM rules coming in very shortly. Rachel Reeves has said over there in Davos, we've been listening to the concerns that have been raised by the non-DOM community, she says. As a minor change, a tweak to the 3-year transitional regime to allow the wealthy taxpayers to adjust the phasing out of their non-DOM status. Now, Number 10 this morning have told us that these changes will not impact the returns they're receiving. They say that we are committed to tax reform that are progressive and underpinned by fairness, replacing it with a residence-based system. But it's not gone unnoticed that while the Labour government is listening to rich millionaires, they're not listening to poor farmers, some of whom the NFU earlier you saw on GB News handing in a petition signed by, I think, up to 300,000 farmers or people against these changes to IHT, which could force some family farms to sell up because of the punitive nature of these changes. They're also not listening to shopkeepers worrying about business rates. They're listening to the very richest, but not the poorest.
We'll see it, I'm sure. I don't think people have much sympathy for non-DOMs with wealth that much exceeds their own. But I think a lot of people can see when politicians are stretching the truth and when politicians made promises in the run-up to the election that changing this loophole, closing this loophole for this non-DOM community, as she calls them, was going to provide an abundance. And instead we've got government borrowing soaring and the tax taker up 40 billion.
Well, that's right. I mean, the government is trying hard to find growth wherever it can. It's got new regulators met last week. More meetings planned soon. The growth is the key focus, of course. They're now hoping for some kind of arrangement with America to avoid a tariff deal. But we hear today that Sir Keir Starmer hasn't spoken to Donald Trump since Inauguration Day. Recently, I mean, it is raising question marks. Why are the farmers being ignored? The pensioners being ignored? The 10 million or so who have lost this £300, £400 winter fuel allowance, and non-DOMs are getting special treatment. It's odd. It's not what you expect from a Labour government. I should say, while I'm with you, that the issue of Southport still dominates Westminster. Earlier we heard how the government has no plans to bring back capital punishment. That's been called for since the Southport killer got a life term with a minimum of 52 years. No plans to extend whole life terms to under 18. They say there's a UN convention that we can't get round, but Kemi Badenoch, the Tory leader, says they will look at that. And the issue of the unduly lenient sentence claimed by the Southport MP over this 52-year minimum life term for the killer, they're saying that is will be looked at by the Attorney General. So, and in my podcast this week, if you're tuning in this weekend, we've heard from Tom Tugendhat, and he thinks that the Prevent scheme that missed all those warnings about the killer needs to be looked at again.
Well, we'll look out for that. Chopper's political podcast available wherever you get your podcasts. For now, Chris Hope, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, if you are in search of some winter sun, here's a little bit of a forecast for some of those top European holiday destinations.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries. All sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Unsettled at times across western parts of Europe. This includes Portugal, Spain and parts of northwest France, where we're likely to see some heavy rain, also some strong winds at times. Largely settled across Tenerife, but Madeira, parts of Portugal, Spain, northwestern France could see some showers merging into longer spells of rain at times and also some strong winds. As we head further east, largely settled across Rome and also parts of Greece, but a chance we could see some showers here as we head into next week, with the best of the temperatures across Tenerife.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Well, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News, and there's plenty more to come. Don't move a muscle. Farmers are raging war against vegan-pushing councils. Stay tuned to find out how they're fighting back.
Lee Anderson's Real World. Fridays from 7 p.m.
Aaron McLean, the goal machine here, used to play for Peterborough United. You bagged loads of goals for them back in the day. But I've got a bone to pick with you, young man. You scored at the City ground against Nottingham Forest for, was it Hull City?
For Hull City, yeah.
Why did you do that?
Well, that was my job, unfortunately. I must say, that was actually one of my favourite goals.
Was it really?
Because I remember, obviously, playing at the City ground, unbelievable stadium, historic.
It is great.
So, and we beat you 1-0.
OK, no need to rub it in. These sports clubs, whether it's football or rugby or whatever, should offer two alternatives, either a professional footballer, or if you don't quite make it, you can still go and play football at a lower level, but have a career as well, maybe be an electrician or a plumber.
100%. You know, listen, I've had multiple conversations with various different people, whether it's the PFA or whether it's clubs. Even players who do have careers, you know, there's so many that don't make it and don't quite make it to the level or only play at a lower level. There's so many that do have long careers, but once you come to the end of that, you've spent, you know, for me, I spent 20 years as a professional footballer. Once I finished playing, what do you then do for the rest of your life? You know, at 35, once you retire, you still have to have a purpose in life. Yeah. But I'd almost be starting from ground zero. I'm fortunate that I went into coaching and then went into the media.
That's good.
But for every one of me, there's hundreds that don't. And I've got so many friends who, I've got to say, you know, have really, really struggled on the, you know, mental health side.
Yeah, it's a good point, actually, because you go from, like, playing in stadiums, big stadiums, small stadiums, crowds, singing your name, and all that sort of stuff, that adulation, the buzz of winning games, and, you know, the downs of losing games, and you go from that to sort of nothing when you finish. I mean, that's a big come down there.
It's a huge come down.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes and Co weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
OK, good afternoon, Britain. It is now 2:48, and people in Gloucestershire are being encouraged to make a series of so-called swaps in seconds to cut their carbon emissions.
But dairy farmers in the predominantly agricultural county are now furious, as one suggestion put forward by the local county council was to swap cow's milk with alternatives such as oat. or soy.
Sacrilege. They say it feels like the government and the local council have their agenda and they now need to stand up for farmers.
But it's not just Gloucestershire. This is happening in dozens of councils across the country. Let's discuss it now with Mo Metcalfe-Fisher from the Countryside Alliance. Mo, what exactly is going on? There seems to be a battle of the councils and the agricultural community.
There is, and it's one, again, just a little bit like the family farm tax, just come at the farmers out of nowhere and for no real reason. We saw it in Oxfordshire, we've had it here in London and places like Lambeth and Enfield, where the councils have actually taken extraordinary measures to ban meat and dairy from even being served. In Oxfordshire, even if you wanted a cup of tea and you were a local councillor there that was subjected to that long meeting and you fancied a cuppa, no, you're not allowed to have any dairy. So it's been banned completely. And some councils have gone even further and they've actually signed up to this so-called treaty, the plant-based treaty. It's not a real treaty, it's just a series of demands by activists online, which basically go even further in that they want to bring plant-based food into schools and old people's homes and prevent the expansion or the building of livestock farms in certain areas. So this is incredibly coordinated. Thankfully, we're talking dozens of councils, but what we are seeing, though, Tom, is we're seeing Veganuary, for example. We're in the month of January. It's a pledge or push to get more people eating less meat or no meat at all. You're seeing councils now. I saw today Hertfordshire Council was pushing Veganuary, and on its website, it's got a whole host of quite extreme animal rights books that they're promoting to plug Veganuary. We want to see an end to this. Look, councils should not be telling people what they should and shouldn't be eating. They shouldn't be jumping on bandwagons and pushing anti-livestock rhetoric in this way. It's terrible. We need to see an end to it.
I mean, I have no right to tell people what they should and shouldn't eat. I mean, when it comes to something that the vast, vast majority of people enjoy every single day, meat and dairy, I mean, it's as if they're trying to make it seriously abnormal. And to go into schools, for schools to decide this for their pupils, rather than for it to be down to parental choice, I think that's pretty unforgivable, actually.
It is, and actually, what really worries us, and we're going to be doing a lot more digging into this, is that parents don't realise. A lot of the time, parents don't know that this is happening in their schools. And look, there's nothing wrong with vegan food. No one cares if someone wants to be a vegan. That's a choice, but it's when it's forced on people, and councils need to back off. And we're running a counter-campaign. We've already got about 12 councils to bring in their own motions, which effectively block compulsory veganism and instead allow councils to source the food that they might need for their meetings and events from local farmers and producers, be that meat, dairy or vegetables. So that's much more progressive and inclusive way forward and defies the plant-based movement, shall we call it?
So that's the pushback has already begun. But this so-called treaty that isn't just saying, you know, it's these councillors who have to have soy milk or whatever it is. Explain a little bit more. They're saying no more livestock farming in the areas of their council.
Yeah, in the areas in which they govern. That by signing that treaty, that's effectively what they're signing up to. It's a document that can be found online. It's not really a treaty, they call it that. It's not been agreed between national governments. In Edinburgh, for example, where they actually signed the treaty, when they outlined what steps they would take to comply, there was actually very little they could do. But it just goes back to the same old point. Why bother? Why bother causing that
It's a student
anxiety?
union, isn't it?
It is. It's virtually.
Imagine a few little student union types sort of making these decisions for the whole of the university.
Student unions talking about Israel and Palestine rather than, you know, I don't know, like living accommodation for students. I mean, these councils should be sorting bins, not bovines.
Well, Mo, we've got to read out what the Gloucestershire County Council spokesperson has said. They say Gloucestershire has an amazing farming community who go above and beyond the call of duty to produce local milk and other products that people across the country enjoy. Any suggestions or campaigns we run are to provide options for people to consider.
We believe in personal choice and do not dictate what our residents should or shouldn't eat. We didn't mean to cause offence or to suggest people shouldn't support their local farmer, and we actively encourage buying local. We're very interested in this debate and are actively taking Gloucestershire farmers or talking to Gloucestershire farmers about how we can support them and discuss the carbon impact of all
They're having
foods.
lovely chats.
They just slid in the carbon impact right there at the end, just to put more impositions on farmers. Good stuff.
Well, Mo Metcalfe-Fisher, thank you very much indeed. You're from the Countryside Alliance, and thank you at home for watching Good Afternoon Britain and throughout the week.
Absolutely. Well, we'll be back for you at midday on Monday. But in the meantime, don't move a muscle. It's the one and only Martin Daubney up for you next, live from Westminster.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, welcome to the latest from the Met Office for GB News. Storm Aowyn continues to move across the UK, bringing dangerous and damaging winds, with the strongest gusts during the rest of Friday moving north into central and northern Scotland. Here's where it's moving as we go through the afternoon. Northern Scotland seeing the strongest winds, having escaped so far, along with a spell of heavy rain and hill snow. Later in the evening, I think gusts of 80, perhaps 90 mile per hour are possible in the far north of Scotland, whilst the very strongest of the winds that we saw across central and southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, North Wales, will be easing overnight. So conditions improving, but still a risk of disruption in the north of Scotland. Elsewhere across the UK, it's a cold start to the weekend because of lighter winds and clear skies. Perhaps some spots where we'll see ice and frost. And it will be cold across Scotland, particularly feeling cold with the strong wind continuing to blow. Frequent wintry showers over the hills and coasts. Northern Ireland also seeing one or two rain, sleet and snow showers moving in. But for England and Wales, it's sunny skies for the vast majority as we begin the weekend. Much lighter winds and actually a fine day to come for many parts of England, Wales and then into southern and eastern Scotland. We're going to see mostly fair weather. Northern Ireland, a reasonable morning, but it turns cloudy and there'll be some lively rain and wind gusts moving in by the end of the afternoon. Meanwhile, the winds finally ease in the north of Scotland, but it stays cold and showery. Elsewhere, it's a fine winter's day, a real change compared with what we're experiencing through Friday. Now, Saturday evening does bring this weather front in the west further east, and it's going to be a gusty feature with some heavy rain for a time, perhaps